The fist came at my face before I even finished turning around. And I want to be honest with you, I had never been in a real fight in my life. I stepped inside it and hit him twice in the bridge of the nose. Bus stop on the edge of Juchang Street, 9:40 at night. And the man swinging at me had been drinking for about 6 hours. I could smell it. Cheap grain liquor and something fried. He had spent the last 4 minutes flipping the hem of a girl's skirt with 2 fingers and laughing like he had invented comedy, until she got on a bus that was not hers just to be somewhere else. Then he threw his can on the ground, and a small girl with a garbage sack picked it up, and he grabbed her by the arm and started screaming that she had stolen his property. She was maybe 11. The sack was bigger than she was. "Uncle," I said, "that is enough." He looked me up and down, skinny shoulders, clean shirt. A face my coworkers like to say was wasted on a man who moved mats around a gym for a living, which is exactly what I did for a living. 23 years old, a law degree my mother bragged about to everyone in our building, no job offers, no savings, and a grandfather in an oncology ward with a tumor and a payment schedule. "Who are you?" he said. "A cop? Rich? What are you?" Then he shoved me, and then he swung, and that is where you came in. He sat down on the curb very suddenly. He spat, and something small and white came out with it. And he stared at it in the streetlight, like a man watching his savings account close. A siren went off 2 blocks away for reasons that had nothing to do with us, and he decided he had somewhere to be. The little girl was crying and smiling at the same time, which is a thing children can do and adults cannot. She grabbed her sack and ran, and in the empty air in front of me, a line of pale blue text unrolled like someone had opened a window nobody else could see. "You defeated an evenly matched opponent. Boxing skill experience plus 20. Evenly matched. I want that on record." The system looked at a man who could not stand up straight and at me and called it a fair fight. I got on the bus, sat in the back, and pulled up the panel. Strength 7, Agility 9, Physique 8, Spirit 18, Talent, Beauty, Green, Excellent, Skills, Speed. Reading level 1, Focus level 1, Culinary level 0, Cleaning level 0, Boxing level 0. 2 months ago, this thing had switched on inside my head with no instructions and no customer service, and for 2 months I had treated it like a phone app I did not understand. It measured everything. It rewarded nothing I was doing. Beauty, green, excellent. Thank you. Extremely useful for a man whose grandfather needed 300,000 yuan. But those 20 points were still glowing. 20 points for one exchange with a drunk. I had spent a full week doing sit-ups in my room and earned less than that. The math walked up and slapped me. This thing did not pay for effort. It paid for contact. It paid for being in it. My knuckles were split. I looked at them the whole way home and did not feel a single thing except interest. Home was a tube building on Juchang Street, 9 floors of concrete with a hallway you could touch both walls of. Auntie Wong caught me at the stairwell with a bundle of paper money and paper clothes because it was the Cold Clothes Festival and I had forgotten again. You burn paper garments so the dead are not cold. Her daughter Ling Wei came out behind her holding the rest of it, wearing a headband, and then went back inside so fast the door clipped her heel. I burned it all in the tin bucket downstairs, next to a photo of a young couple with a baby. The man in the photo was my father. He left our apartment on my 6th birthday after hiding a pistol under his coat, where he thought I could not see it. And the last thing he ever said to me was, "Live a good life. Being an ordinary person is enough." I found the newspaper in the same drawer as the incense, the way I found it every year. Yellow, folded into eighths, one column circled by nobody. A serial killer had shot himself. Bloody secrets buried in the fire. That was the whole story the city got. So, that night I sat on the floor with a criminal law textbook and turned on focus and speed reading together and ate 1,000 pages in a little under an hour. And then my skull tried to leave through my eyes, because 1 hour is the ceiling, and the ceiling does not negotiate. And somewhere in there, between the headache and the burning paper, I stopped asking what the panel was for. Ordinary was what my father asked for. Ordinary was my mother, sleeping on a folding cot in a cancer ward. Ordinary was 200 yuan a night at a night market and a girl who had to get on the wrong bus. I wrote one line in the back of the law textbook. Fitness plan. Convict conditioning. 5 in the morning, my room, floor cold enough to sting. The book was called Convict Conditioning, and the author had spent 19 years inside with no gym, no supplements, and nothing to do. He called it the 6 arts of the prisoner. Push-up, squat, pull-up, leg raise, back bridge, handstand push-up, 6 movements, no equipment, no excuses. I did 20 push-ups and my arms quit. 20. I lay there with my cheek on the concrete doing the arithmetic of my own uselessness. Then I got angry, which turned out to be the useful part. The game had started. If I could not take the first step, I was going to be a loser with a system, which is worse than a loser without one, because at least he has an excuse. Focus on. The room went quiet. 25, 30. My arms folded and I hit the floor face first, and the window opened. Unlock skill, push-up level 0. Unlock skill, potential activation, hidden. Use immediately. I used it immediately because I am a man of science. I have never felt anything like it. Every ache drained out of my shoulders like someone had pulled a plug, and the fatigue went with it, and I was lying on the floor at 5 in the morning, feeling like I had just climbed out of a hot spring. I did 50 more, then I did 30 more than that. 83 total, and the experience ticked up 1 point for every 5 clean reps, which meant the system was watching my form and quietly judging it. Then potential activation went gray. Cooldown, 71 hours, 39 minutes, 56 seconds, 3 days, fine, noted. My miracle button had a weekly schedule. The sun came up while I was still on the floor, and I went out to the roof and yelled at it for about 4 seconds before 3 neighbors yelled back through their windows in language I will not repeat. So that was settled. I was going to lift. 2 days later, my push-up skills sat at 51 out of 100, and I found the hidden tab. You walked 1,000 steps, physique plus 0.001. The panel had been recording everything. Every flight of stairs, every bag of rice, every bus I ran for. Micro increments, 4 decimal places, all of it real. Physique was sitting at 99% of the way to 9. My schedule got written on the wall in marker. 5 to 7:30, train, 7:30 to 8:30, study. Breakfast, egg fried rice, and the panel gave me 1 point of culinary experience for it, which is the exact moment I learned this system had no dignity whatsoever. 9:05 bus. That morning, Auntie Wang was talking to nobody in particular about how Uncle Chen had been out all night on a murder case, and Ling Wei was carrying a thermos of soup down to him, with 3 bags hanging off her wrists. I took the bags. We used to collect bottles together when we were 7. Then we hit 10th grade and she got sick and took a leave of absence, and we became 2 people who nodded in a hallway. She looked at me sideways the whole walk to the stop, and finally said it out loud to the air. I feel like Wei Hao has changed. Lady, you have no idea, and neither do I. The club was on the 2nd floor of a shopping mall, and my domain was mats, dumbbells, towels, and mopping. 9:30 to 6:30. At noon, I did push-ups in the changing room, while 3 coworkers explained to each other that I was doing it to find a rich woman. I also listened. That was the part they did not charge for. Dai's coach Guo, teaching beginners. Boxing is the most offensive art there is, and everything true about it happens below the waist. The senior coach, teaching the professional class about shadow boxing. A dancer takes her rhythm from the music. A fighter takes his rhythm from an opponent who is not there. If you throw a punch without thinking first, you will be a heavy bag for the rest of your life. I stood at the back with a mop and thought, I have a panel. My imaginary opponent can be anyone I have ever seen on a disc. That night I did 74 squats until my legs stopped being legs. Unlock skill, squat level 0. And potential activation came off cooldown at the exact same moment, which felt less like luck and more like being handed a second glass by a bartender who wants to see what happens. I rented a stack of discs the next day and built myself a sparring partner out of them. Here is how shadowboxing works when you have a system. You do not flail at the air. You pick a man and you put him in the room with you. I picked a heavyweight champion, 1.90 m, arms like mooring rope, the one on the disc who ended 3 fights in the first round while smiling. I put him against my wall and I let him hit me. He knocked me down constantly, not physically, worse. I would step in, and the version of him living behind my eyes would already be turning his shoulder, and my brain would deliver the verdict with total confidence. In a real fight, that hook just switched you off. So I ate it and went again, and somewhere in the 4th hour, I noticed something. I was reading him faster than he could throw. Spirit 18. I had never known what that number bought me because nothing in my life had ever required it. It turns out it buys the half second where the world slows down and you can see the shoulder load before the hand moves. The champion on my wall had a real man's speed. I had a nervous system that had been quietly overclocked while I was busy being unemployed. I switched opponents. I put Coach Guo in the room, the man whose beginner class I mopped around. And for a while, it was almost even. Then the window opened. Boxing level 1, choose your enhancement. 6 free attribute points or 2 physique and a skill effect called Iron Fist. I read the description of Iron Fist twice. The bones and muscle of the hands are reinforced to double the value of the physique attribute. Double, not +2. Double forever. Scaling with a number I intended to spend the rest of my life raising. 10. Physique means my hands are built like 20. 20 means 40. Sit with that for a second because I did, on the floor, at 1 in the afternoon, with my breakfast still uneaten on the table because I had been at this for 6 hours straight. At some point up that ladder, tearing something apart with bare hands stops being a figure of speech. I took Iron Fist. Physique 11. I also learned that 6 hours of shadowboxing makes you forget to eat. and that the panel does not care about your blood sugar, and that a man can be very happy lying on a cold floor if the number went up. Renan Hospital sits at the foot of Sishan, and the oncology ward is on the 8th floor, and I know exactly how long that elevator takes because I have counted it maybe 200 times. That day I shared it with 3 debt collectors. One of them was built like a vending machine, in a shirt 2 sizes too tight on purpose. One was a kid with bleached blonde hair who kept sniffing. The third was thin and quiet and smelled like an ashtray. They smoked in a hospital elevator and shouldered a nurse out of the way. And I stood in the corner with 3 containers of food and a thermos of soup and said nothing, because I was 23 and made 4,000 yuan a month. My mother, Qin Yue, was mopping the floor of the ward when I came in. Not her ward. Not her job. She just could not sit still in a room where her father was attached to tubes, so she cleaned it. "You ate already?" she said, which is the only question she has ever really asked me. I ate. Try the fish. Crispy outside, soft inside. She tried the fish and told me it was almost as good as hers, which from her is a standing ovation. My grandfather, Hao Sen, was awake, stomach cancer. The surgery was 2 months out and the money had run out about a month before that, and everybody in the room knew both of those numbers and nobody said either of them. My uncle Lin Yu was there too, in a jacket that had been expensive during a previous administration. 6 years ago, he went south to do business and came back with a limp and a story. He lives on my aunt's money and his own commentary. If your father were alive, he told me, people would be calling me Master Jun, and you would be young master. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand. I have found a benefactor, he said, tapping the side of his nose. Big project, the money will be there. My mother did not look up from the mop. Down the hall, somebody started screaming. It was Ward 803, and the debt collectors from the elevator had a family out in the corridor. Husband, long-haul driver. Wife, quit her job 2 years ago. And on the bed behind them, a boy about 6 years old with leukemia watching the door. 40,000 in debt with interest. 300,000 needed for the treatment. The father was on his knees on hospital linoleum, and he was not begging for mercy, he was negotiating. I found a buyer, he said, for a kidney, mine. Give me 10 days. The vending machine said that was nice, and that in the meantime they would be taking the boy as collateral. 2 security guards stood at the end of the corridor and became extremely interested in a fire extinguisher. The blonde kid had a folding knife out and was opening and closing it, tick, 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 so everyone could hear his personality. I put my thermos down on the windowsill. Hey, I said, could you keep it down a little? I want to be clear that I did not have a plan. I had 11 physique, a skill called Iron Fist that I had owned for about 4 hours, and a very strong feeling. I fainted left. The blonde kid's chin came up. I kicked him where it counts, and when the knife came around, I caught his wrist. And this is the moment my whole life quietly changed, because his wrist did not move, not an inch. I had him in a clamp made out of a number on a screen. The knife hit the floor. Then my fist hit his jaw, and he lay down on the linoleum like a man who had been looking for a place to nap. Behind me, the thin one was already swinging a steel thermos at the back of my head. I felt the air move. I slipped it and put 2 into his liver, and he folded up around them. You defeated 2 nameless enemies. Boxing plus 25. Nameless. The system had opinions about everyone. Is that quieter? I said. It was extremely quiet. The vending machine had not moved during any of it. He was still leaning on the wall with his arms crossed, and he was smiling, which I did not enjoy at all. Then he pushed off the wall and walked over, and I set my feet, and he stuck out his hand. You do boxing too? He said. Are we in the same profession? That is a real sentence a man said to me while his 2 employees were on the floor. He wanted to talk about my feint. He liked the way I changed the line of the hook halfway through. He said we should spar sometime, at a gym, properly. And he said it the way other men say we should get lunch. Standing that close to him, I finally understood the difference between a man who trains and a man who has used it. And it was not the muscle, it was the pressure. Coach Guo never made the air feel like that. So I stopped punching and started doing the only thing I actually had a degree in. Take the boy, I said. And you were looking at abduction with a minor who requires medical care. Who pays for the treatment then? He is on a course. A month from now, he is discharged. The father sells the kidney or does not. And either way, you get your 40,000 from a man who is grateful, instead of one who is in a police station telling a story with your face in it. He thought about it for 4 seconds. 1 month, he said, and handed me a card. Xiaohan, head of collections, Black Snake Finance. His assistant, being helpful, added out loud that the company belonged to the Viper. He and Xiaohan closed his eyes briefly the way a man does when his employees speak. Then my mother arrived at a dead run and grabbed my arm and asked if I had been fighting gangsters. And Chin was hitting them like a world champion, my uncle announced to the corridor. There is something of my brother-in-law in that boy. My mother looked at him. My grandfather looked at him. My uncle discovered a very interesting spot on the ceiling. The family in 803 lost the room that evening anyway, because of the bill. I found them outside at the base of the columns near the entrance, the three of them on a bench with their bags, and the mother was softening a cold bun in a cup of hot water from the ward machine. The boy was awake. He was looking through the glass at the hospital shop, where a girl about his age was eating a fried chicken leg, and he was swallowing very carefully so his parents would not hear him do it. I went and bought food. Fried fish, chicken, warm milk, 3 sets. I put the bags on the bench. When you grow up, I told the boy, do not forget to take care of your parents. Then I left, fast, before anyone could say anything, because there were 200 won folded flat at the bottom of the bag, and I did not want to be there when they found them. On the bus, I did arithmetic like a man planning a heist. 2 months to the surgery. Sparring partner rate at the club starts at 500 an hour. 2 sessions a day is 10 to 20,000 a month against my current 4. Amateur tournaments on top. It was not enough. It was the first number in my life that was even in the same room as enough. The push-ups got weird after that. Standard reps stopped paying, so I went into the book and started climbing its ladder. Wide arm, and 15 of those cost what 10 standard did. Diamond, 20. Then the ones where you shove yourself off the floor hard enough to clap, and 25 of those hurt in places I did not have names for. Leg raise level 0, unlocked. Push-up level 1, 4 free points. Strength 9, agility 10, physique 12. Spirit 18, 10 days of this. I stood in front of the mirror in the changing room and turned sideways with real hope, and my stomach remained a rumor. The changing room was also where my coworkers built their theory about me. He wants a rich woman, Chin Fan explained to the room while I was in a squat. Karate department, 10 years in, the kind of man who tells you his lineage before his name. Marry up, retire at 25. Now that is a life goal. I said nothing because I knew what this actually was. Old Gao was retiring, the deputy slot was opening, Chin Fan wanted it, and I had filed a request to transfer departments. In his head, I had entered a race. In my head, I had entered a gym. Then the manager solved his own staffing problem by sending me to marketing. Marketing meant standing at entrance 7 of the shopping mall, handing out flyers for 8 hours. I would rather have done 1,000 push-ups. 1,000 push-ups end. Handing out flyers is telling the same bad joke to strangers 400 times while they walk through you. The women were the problem. They came in groups. They took 2 flyers each. One of them pressed a folded note into my hand and told me with tremendous warmth that Auntie did not want to see a young man working himself so hard, and that her number was on the paper. I turned on focus and the entire shopping mall became a soft electrical hum, and I stood there for 6 hours being professionally handsome, which is how I ended up staring at the poster. It was on the pillar by the escalator, glossy, 2 meters tall, Fighting King Guo Ping, Olympic boxing champion, 2-time free fight champion, first man from our country to hold a world belt in the KFC promotion. And in red across the bottom, arriving at the Global Elite Combat Club on December 17th. He had trained in our building before he was anyone. The invitation had reportedly cost north of 100,000. I stood there with a fistful of flyers and put a date on my life for the first time. Then I heard shouting from the elevators, and there was Xiao Han in a suit, herding pedestrians toward a folding table with actual kicks, handing out leaflets for something called Gao's Tai Chi Qigong. He saw me. I saw him. We each held up our stack of paper. Neither of us said a word. There was nothing to say. We were co-workers now. The next morning I went over the manager's head, which in a company that size is either career suicide or a shortcut. And I still do not know which one it was. Coach Xiao Qiang runs the Sanda department. 50 flat nose, forearms like bridge cable, permanently annoyed. I found him between classes and asked to be taken on as a trainee, and I watched a man decide he had just won something. You are he's, he said. I move mats. I am nobody's. You are in the boxing department. I would like not to be. He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed it in a way that was 50% affection and 50% quality inspection. And then he walked straight past the manager's office to human resources, with me trailing behind him like a defector crossing a border. He introduced me to 3 people as the kid who came over from the enemy camp. He was gleeful about it for about a week. Sanda is boxing that got tired of rules. Hands, feet, throws, clinch. And the throws are the entire point. It is also the reason he was in a good mood. Xiao Qiang was Guo Ping's first coach, back when Guo Ping was a skinny 19-year-old, and the poster on the pillar downstairs had put a certain spring in the man's step. That evening I stayed after the lights went down in the main hall and worked the 90-kilo bag alone, strength 10. It does not sound like much. The bag disagreed. I put a low kick into it, and the whole chain rattled, and the sound it made in an empty gym was not a slap. It was a flat, dull report, like something going off in a closed room. I stood there with my shin ringing and looked at that bag for a while. 10. I was going to find out what 40 sounded like. Then it rained for 3 days and ruined my schedule, because there is no pull-up bar in a room the size of a bathroom, and the one in the yard turns into a wet steel pipe. So, I moved everything into squats. The book has a ladder there too, and I climbed it until I got to single-leg half squats, which are the exercise where you find out that your body has been lying to you about your legs. Squat level 1, 2 options again. Free points, or 1 strength and a skill effect called the aloof. The aloof triples testosterone secretion under load and rebuilds muscle and bone at 3 times the rate. I want to explain why that is not a boring choice. Free points are a fish. An effect is a fishing rod that keeps working while I sleep. Every single rep I ever do from that day forward would be worth 3 of the reps I did yesterday, forever, at no cost. I took the rod. The side effects showed up within a day. I ran hot all the time, like a man with a low fever who feels great. My pulse sat high. Twice that week, my nose started bleeding for no reason while I was reading, and I ate 10 boiled eggs, 3 bags of milk, and a basket of steamed buns for breakfast. 3 lunches, staggered, because if I ate them at once I got sleepy. My mother would have wept. My wallet did. I calculated at one point that I was spending more on food than on rent. And then I stopped calculating, because there was no version of this where I ate less. Chin Fan stopped needling me around then, which told me something about him. The moment he heard I had moved to Sanda, he decided I was out of the race for deputy, and he immediately became a warm and generous senior colleague. He started giving me advice. Some of it was even useful. "You want the sparring partner money," he said, leaning on a rack of gloves. "There is a Japanese in the karate department, suspended. Nobody will work with him. The club pays him like a king to keep him in the building. Why will nobody work with him?" "Because he breaks them," Chin Fan said, and smiled at me with genuine friendliness. 500 an hour minimum, 2 sessions a day. You do the math. I did the math. 30,000 a month against my 4. My grandfather had 2 months. 10 days, I told myself. 10 days, and I take the test. That night, I did 554 leg raises. The chart on my wall had 3 columns: study, martial arts, physical conditioning. The 3rd column had the 6 arts written out, and 3 of them had check marks. I put a 4th one on: leg raise level 1, 6 free points, strength 12, agility 11, physique 16, spirit 18. Through the wall, the Guo family were having the argument they had roughly twice a month. Inspector Wei Yu had come home at 4 in the morning again, and Auntie Wang was doing a full performance about where he had really been, and then pivoting, as she always did, to the fact that he had been an inspector for 10 years and had never once learned to take anything or flatter anybody. Their 5-year-old Min Chin slept through it. Ling Wei did not. I could hear her moving around at 4:30. On my calendar, there were 2 circles: 28 days to the graduate exam, 15 days to Guo Ping. The video store was called Wuyu Audio Visual, and the owner's name was He Sen, and he had a limp on the left side and about 50 years on his face. He was a boxer once. He never said which promotion, and I never asked. What I knew was that he could name every fighter on every disc in that shop and tell you what each of them did wrong. The day I came in for my next stack, he had 2 teenagers with bleached hair cornered by the counter and was selling them 10 discs for 500 yuan. "Study these," he was telling them, "and you can star in a kung fu movie, 10 men. You will put down 10 men. Then he saw me, and his eyes lit up, and he pointed at me like an exhibit. "This one," he announced, "this one watches my discs every single day. Look at him, handsomer and stronger than when he walked in here." The teenagers looked at me. I stood there holding my discs. I have never felt more like a before and after photograph in my life. The North Point night market ran 4 blocks and smelled like cumin and burnt sugar, and Ling Wei had a folding table there where she sold things she made by hand. She was doing well that night. That was the problem. By the time I got there, Brother He and his friends had found her. He had 2 fingers hooked in the scarf around her neck and was explaining the concept of a stall fee. "Let go," I said. He looked at me the way the drunk at the bus stop had looked at me, and then he whistled, and 8 or 9 of them came out of the crowd with folding stools and beer bottles. I handed Ling Wei my bag. "Honestly," I told her, "I have been training at a boxing gym for a while now. I would like to test it on them." She said my name in a very small voice. Nobody in this story ever takes me seriously the first time. The first one I hit in the nose with a straight right, and he sat down in a puddle. The second one came with a bottle, and I kicked his lead leg out, and he went into a table of dried squid. Then, a folding stool caught me across the forearm, and I want to be honest, that hurt for 4 days. Focus on. The night market went quiet. The music went away. The frying stopped. And what was left in front of me was a pack of snarling dogs with their mouths open and no sound coming out. I threw one over my hip into a charcoal grill. That is the part everyone remembers. I remember the sweeps, 3 of them, one after another, and the way my legs did exactly what I had drilled in an empty hall at 10 at night for 2 weeks. You defeated a group of street thugs. Boxing plus 45. Unlock skill, Sanda level 0. And there it was, the rule I had been guessing at. You do not have to master an art to unlock it. You have to take some part of it and drive that part high enough that the system decides you are doing the thing rather than imitating it. Brother? He was on his knees asking me to consider his family situation. I took 100 yuan out of my pocket and put it in his hand. For your brothers, I said. Medical. He stared at the money. I told him I spar with Xiao Han, which was technically true if you counted one conversation in a hospital corridor. I have never watched a man reformat himself that fast. Suddenly we were brothers. Suddenly the stall was under his personal protection. Your sister is my sister, he announced to the entire market. On North Point, nobody touches her. He was 3 blocks away before he realized he had never asked my name. And at the edge of the crowd, there was an older man with a limp, holding a stick of grilled meat in one hand and a bottle in the other, watching me the entire time and not eating. I pedaled her home on the flatbed tricycle with all her stock in the back. She had made over 200 yuan that night, more than she had ever taken at that market. And for about 10 minutes, she was so happy she could not sit still. Then it turned, the way it does with her. I never finish anything, she said. Since I was small, I start and it goes wrong. I kept pedaling. The street was wet and the lights were doubled in it. Things fall apart for you because you do not have a dream, I said. It sounds stupid. It is not. A person with a dream gets something extra, not luck, belief. It carries you through the part where nothing is working. Do you have one? 2 months ago, I would have said something clever. I am getting there, I said. When I have the answer, I will tell you first, in secret, like when we were kids. She was quiet for a block. Then she said, okay, very quietly, and I heard her smiling behind me and did not turn around. The sparring partner test was supposed to be a formality, and instead it became a public event, because both Coach Guo and Coach Yu turned up to glare at each other over my head about which of them I belonged to. Test 1 was push-ups on a countermat. The house record was 219, set over 10 years by everyone who had ever tried. I stopped at 250 because Xiao Chang shouted at me to stop. By then the whole floor was counting out loud, and someone was filming, and my breathing was still even, and my arms were not shaking, and that was the part that made the room strange. It is one thing to see a number. It is another to watch a man do 250 and then stand up and not need the wall. Push-up experience plus 15. 15. 250 reps. The system continued to be a hard grader. Test 2 was contact. Can he take a hit? Chen. He volunteered for it personally, which everybody understood. Head of karate, 3rd Dan Shotokan, close personal friend of the manager, whose authority I had walked around. He picked up the focus pad himself and told me to hold it. Then he came off the floor with a flying roundhouse. I saw the load in his hip before his foot left the ground, and I set my base and turned my shoulder into it. The impact moved me half a step. Half. The pad rang. Not bad, he announced to the room. The boy took about half of my power. He limped for the rest of the afternoon. Later, in the corridor, I heard him hissing at someone through his teeth. Is that kid's fist even made of flesh? He had not hit my hands. He had hit a pad my hands were behind. He had broken something small in his own foot on Iron Fist, and he did not know it yet. I signed the contract that day. Sparring partner, Global Elite Combat Club. The next morning, I met the man they had hired me to survive. Yamada Takeshi was maybe 1.70 meters, built like a fire hydrant, bald, with a face that had gone soft and greasy around a pair of eyes that had not gone soft at all. Goju-ryu Karate. 2 assistants carried his bags. He had been suspended from the KFC promotion after failing a drug test, and the club paid him a fortune to keep training in our building rather than someone else's. I got to watch him work before I ever stood across from him. He took Chen. He into a guillotine in the middle of a friendly session and did not let go. It took 4 people to get his arms open. Chen. He sat on the mat afterward with his hand on his own throat, breathing carefully. Then Yamada Takeshi turned around and pointed at me and shouted something in Japanese, and his translator, who looked exhausted by his entire life, said that the master wished for the new sparring partner to come up now. I looked at the ring. I thought about 500 yuan an hour and a surgery in 8 weeks. Tell him not to worry, I said. His wish will be granted very soon. At 3 in the morning, something blew up on the other side of the city and rearranged everybody's life, and at the time, all I knew about it was that my mother would not pick up her phone. I was doing agility work in my room when the television in the next apartment started repeating itself. Explosion at the Xishan archaeological site. Large fire. Sabotage not ruled out. Military police and state security had sealed the entire Jiguan district and were turning cars around at the district line. Renan Hospital sits at the foot of Xishan. I called my mother 9 times. 9. The 9th one, I was already putting my shoes on. She rang back at 20 past 4, sounding tired and irritated, which is the most reassuring tone of voice in the world. The hospital is fine. They have been bringing people in all night, that is all. Your grandfather drank his kanji. Why are you awake? No reason. Your uncle came by, she said. He says the deal is moving. He says there will be money for the surgery and also for an apartment when you get married. Great. Tell him to focus on the first one. I hung up and stood in the dark for a while and did not go back to bed. There were two things about that night I could not put down. The first was the phrase sabotage not ruled out, which is what the news says when it has been told to say nothing. The second was that I had been 3 kilometers from it and had not felt a thing, and yet somehow I had woken up at 10 to 3 with my heart going. Jongbin Park has an outdoor training area, and every morning it fills up with sports students and the kind of amateur champions who have a following. I went there for the pull-up bar and stayed for the humiliation. There was a boy doing one-arm pull-ups in sets. There was a man walking the length of the high bar on his hands. There was a girl doing 360-degree turns around the bar like the laws of physics were a suggestion. I did 10 pull-ups and my back gave out. 2 girls near the parallel bars looked over, and one of them said something, and they both laughed. And the phrase that carried was that the difference between him and them is the difference between a whippet and a wolfhound. She was not wrong. That was the annoying part. I walked home doing math again. Physique 16, strength 12. My upper back was the weakest chain in the whole machine, and the 5th of the 6 arts was sitting there untouched. And every day I did not solve, it was a day of interest on a loan I had taken out against my grandfather's calendar. It rained the next morning, properly rained. The kind that comes sideways with thunder in it and empties the parks. I went anyway. I want to tell this part carefully, because it is the morning everything turned. The bar in Jongbin Park is 2 meters 80 in steel, and in that rain, it was a wet pipe. I took off my raincoat. Then I took off my thermal shirt too, because if I was going to do this, I was not going to do it half-wrapped in dry clothes like a man protecting himself. Nobody came. That was the whole idea. A real strong man is the one who helps himself. The first 50 were normal, the next 100 were work. Somewhere after that, my hearing went. I do not mean it got quiet. I mean, it switched off cleanly, and the storm turned into a silent film happening around me. The ground under my feet stopped looking like ground. From up on the bar in the gray, it looked like the edge of a drop, and my brain, being helpful, decided I was a climber on a wall with nothing underneath. So I climbed, and in that silence, tiny lines began scrolling in the corner of my vision, over and over, dozens of them. You have grasped a certain kind of meditation, profound truth. Spirit plus 0.001. Again, again, again. Unlock skill, pull-up level, 0. Spirit 18 became Spirit 19, and then Spirit 20. And I was not counting reps anymore. I was somewhere else entirely, hanging in a gray nowhere with the rain going through me. Then lightning hit somewhere across the river, and the thunder came, and my hearing came back with it, like a door being kicked in, and I lost the bar. Potential activation. I hit the button on instinct on the way down, and my hands closed on wet steel that should have been impossible to hold, and I hung there shaking. And then I noticed what had changed. I could taste the rainwater. Not water, soil in it, and cut grass, and something metallic off the bar. A kilometer away across the park, there was an apartment block, and in one of the windows I could see people moving, and I could tell there were 3 of them, and that one was a child. Spirit 20. That is what 2 extra points bought. I sat on the bar above a drowned city with my shirt in a puddle, and I said it to nobody at all. Even if this panel disappeared tomorrow and took every skill with it, I am never going to be weak again. Then the panel, which has excellent timing, exactly once per year, showed me something new. Talent synthesis. 2 skills at level 1 fuse into a green talent, 3 at level 2, blue, 4 at level 3, purple epic, 5 at level 4, orange legendary, 6 skills at level 5, gold, mythic. I looked at my one existing talent, beauty, green, excellent, acquired at birth, useful for absolutely nothing, 6 at level 5, 6 arts of the prisoner. I did not even have to be clever about it, the shape was just sitting there. I decided in the rain that I would never fuse anything until I could fuse the top. My first day as a paid sparring partner, the human resources girl handed me the contract with the tone of a woman betting against me. Then I met Yamada Takeshi's warm-up. His 2 assistants stood on either side of him with wooden staves and beat him. Shoulders, ribs, forearms, thighs, body conditioning, Goju Ryu. And by the end of it, his skin was a map of purple, and he had not made a sound. Then he pointed at the pads, and I put them on. His strength, if I read it against my own panel, was somewhere between 15 and 20. I had 12. That gap is not something you close with courage, but he had never fought a man with Spirit 20. I could see the punch before it existed, not the arm, the breath. The pupils going flat. The one shoulder loading a fraction earlier than the other. I started putting the pad where his fist was going to be, half a beat before he sent it, and something strange started happening. He lost his rhythm. From outside the ring, it looked like the old master was missing. That is what everyone watching thought. He was not missing. I was arriving early, over and over, and his body kept getting the answer before it asked the question, and it drove him quietly insane. 10 minutes in, he threw the pads away and came in for a clinch. I let him have it, turned my hip in, and threw him. Side throw. The one Fang Cheng had drilled into me every evening in an empty hall. Yamada Takeshi went over and hit the canvas, and I followed him down. And I do not think a single person in that building had seen him on his back in years. He slapped the mat. Twice. Hard. Tap. Then he lay there breathing and stuck his thumb up at the ceiling. Sanda plus 50. Chen. He came over afterward with an expression like a man swallowing a coin. Mr. Yamada has instructed us to raise your rate, he said, from 500 an hour to 1,000. I said thank you very professionally and went into the changing room and sat down for a minute. Later, one of the assistants told me what he said in the car on the way home, with his wrists black and his feet ruined, in a voice that was still shaking. Finally, someone who can take it. Maybe I do not need to wait for that new champion Guopeng after all. That evening I stayed late again and caught the 90-kilo bag on its return swing. Not blocked, caught. My fingers went into the leather and the whole thing stopped dead, like it had hit a wall and the chain above it jumped. Sanda, level 1, 5 free points. Physique 16, 4 short of 20, and 20 was starting to look like a door rather than a number. Then I went at the 5th art, and the 5th art nearly ended me. The back bridge is not a stretch. It is a demand that your spine become load-bearing in a direction it does not believe in. I started at the bottom of the ladder, short bridge, straight bridge, half bridge, and my torso was so stiff, I felt something in my lower back click in a way that made me lie very still for a full minute. The book calls the goal, opening the dragon's back, activating the whole chain of extensors along the spine as one unit, and then it simply opened. Unlock skill, back bridge level 0. No struggle, no week of failing. It came free, and I understood why. Spirit 20 was not just reaction speed. It was body awareness. I could feel individual muscles I had never been introduced to, and once you can feel them, you can ask them to work. I put 4 points into physique and 1 into strength. Physique 20. I found out what that meant in the shower. There was a body in the mirror, not a big one, a cut one, lines where there had been nothing, and when I turned to the side there were 6 of them across my stomach, sitting there like they had always been there. I did an extra session that night out of pure vanity. 500 jackknife push-ups, 500 single-leg squats, 90 bridges, 120 pull-ups, 120 leg raises, 1.5 hours, start to finish. On the way back up the block, I passed the bathhouse, where 4 aunties were conducting the neighborhood's daily broadcast. I heard Wei Hao's dead father was a murderer. Aunt Chin told her exactly what she thought of that, and the topic changed to somebody's son-in-law. I kept walking with my ears extremely open and my face extremely calm. Upstairs, I carried a 50-kilo coal cylinder to the 9th floor in one hand, the way you carry a bag of milk, and I only noticed I was doing it when Ling Wei came out onto the landing and stopped and stared. She had my training clothes soaking in a basin. She had not asked. She went red to the ears and said something about the water being wasted anyway and shut her door. That night I burned a pot of pork rib soup so badly the bottom turned to tar, and I ate the entire thing, including the tar, because I am not a man who throws away protein. Unlock skill, gourmet level 0. The description said I could now tolerate food unbearable to ordinary people. Are you serious? I asked my empty kitchen. The panel did not answer. It never answers. It just hands you a survival skill for burnt soup while you are trying to become strong enough to matter, and waits for you to be grateful. By the next week I could not fit all the requests into my schedule. 7 or 8 bookings, minimum 5,000 yuan. And that was before Saito's sessions. First tier partners get 500 to 700 an hour. Second tier from 800. He paid 1,000 and had his assistant hand me a business card with a house address in Wenchuan district. Mr. Yamada is full of admiration, the translator said. He invites you to his home this weekend. Chen Hei, who 2 weeks earlier had tried to break my ribs with a focus pad, now held doors for me. I heard him explaining me to a colleague as the tank who finally holds the aggro, which told me a lot about what the karate department did with its evenings. I said yes to the invitation. Of course I said yes. I wanted on the record that, at that point in my life, the most dangerous thing I could imagine was a suspended karate champion in a nice house. Before the weekend, I stopped at the video store, and I caught Hee-sen watching something he should not have been watching. He hit the remote so fast he knocked over a stack of cases. The drawer under the counter did not close all the way, and the covers in it were extremely pink. I am past 50, he said, with tremendous dignity. And I never married. What exactly is the problem here? I did not say anything. You had a face. This is my only face. He recovered by attacking me instead, which is how our friendship worked. He pointed at my head and told me my hair was thinning, and then he delivered a lecture with 3 parts. Do not eat filthy things. Do not inject anything into your body for the sake of your shape. And a third item that I will summarize as, and stop that as well. I am not injecting anything, I said. Everyone says that. He limped down the shelf, pulled a case out of the middle, and put it on the counter like it was a gun in a briefcase. Take this instead. Jiu-jitsu, the Tao of life and death. The masters demonstrate personally, he said. Techniques the schools do not release. You will not find this on any market stall in this city. Why do you have it? He ignored that completely. He was already onto his real point, and he watched my face while he made it. And chin. You love this so much. Have you never thought about finding people who feel the same way? Somewhere to spar properly. That was the second time in 1 week that someone had asked me that. Sen stood with his weight on his good leg and did not look away. Jiu-jitsu is not about locks, he said as I left. It is about feeling the turn between life and death with your heart. I said thanks for the disc. I did not answer the other question, and he did not ask it again, and both of us noticed. The park at dawn belongs to old men and to me. Pull-up level 1. 6 free points, and I spent all 6. Strength 18, agility 12, physique 20, spirit 20. Then I lay down on the wet grass and started learning how to fall. That is the first thing on the disc. Not a single lock, not a single throw. Ukemi. Breck falls, forward roll, back roll, side roll, and then the 2 that made the old men stop their morning walk to watch. The shrimp and the crab, where you move across the ground on your back and shoulders like something that lives in water. An hour of that, and I was covered in grass and dew, and I had not fought anybody. But the man on the disc said one line that stuck to me all week. In jiu-jitsu, the sacrifice technique and the finishing technique are yin and yang, life and death. They turn into each other at any moment, without warning. I would like to say I understood that on the lawn. I did not. I understood it 2 days later in a courtyard, when I was in the air, going backwards, into a wall. Yamada Takeshi's house in Wenchuan district had a gardener, a maid, a red sports car in the drive, and a young woman in a white dress who watched me from a first-floor window and did not wave. The translator took me through to a reception room. Yamada Takeshi sat with his back very straight and asked one question through him. Who was your teacher? I trained as a child, I said. Then I stopped. I came back to it 2 years ago. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once and the translator produced an envelope. Inside was a check for 100,000 yuan. The prize for a match without rules, the translator said, in the flat voice of a man reading a script he did not write. All medical costs will be covered by Mr. Yamada personally. He wishes you to understand the scale. To engage a champion as a sparring partner costs more than 50,000 for a single session. Mr. Yamada believes you are worth this money. I held 100,000 yuan in my hand. My grandfather's surgery was 2 months out and about a third funded. Where? I said. The courtyard was white sand and standing stones, with a plum tree in the corner that was actually in flower. It was the most beautiful place I had ever been invited to have my ribs broken in. He came at me with the hands. Goju-ryu is close range, and it is heavy. And for about 90 seconds, it was the hardest thing I had ever been in. Then I found his rhythm and started living inside it. Slip, slip, low kick to the liver. He grunted. I did it again, and he changed levels, and I put a straight right down the middle, and he blocked it with his forearm. He blocked it with his forearm, and something in his hand went. That is Iron Fist. Physique 20 means my hands are built like 40, and nobody in that courtyard, including me, had fully understood what that meant until the moment he made contact with one, and his own bones lost the argument. He came off balance, and I threw a round kick into his ribs, and he went into one of the standing stones. Boxing, plus 30. Sanda, plus 35. 2 ribs. I heard them. He was on the sand with his back against a rock, and I stepped forward to call it, and Yamada Takeshi started laughing. He licked the corner of his mouth. He got up on one knee, and then he stood, and the laughing did not stop, and the translator was already backing toward the door. You really are strong enough, he said. Then he said the other thing. Now please pay attention with 100% of your attention. And his clothes came apart. I need you to understand that I do not mean they tore at the seams. I mean his shirt left him in pieces because the man inside it was getting bigger. His skin went a blue-black color, dark and tight, and under it, things moved that were the wrong shape, like pythons turning over in a sack. He had been 1.70 meters. He finished somewhere near 1.80 meters, and his arms were not arms anymore. They were levers. He punched the limestone rock he had been leaning on, and it came apart. I had 4 seconds to update every number I owned. My estimate of his strength went past 20 and kept going. He came in, and I met him with a combination that would have ended anyone in my building, and he took all of it on his face and caught my fist in his hand. caught it, then he squeezed. I have felt a lot of pain since then, and I still remember that particular one. My whole hand went into a vice with a mind behind it. So I did the only thing available to a man, with 100,000 yuan on the line and no dignity left to lose. I threw a handful of white courtyard sand into his eyes and kicked him in the groin. He let go. That is the good news. The bad news is that it made him angry. And an angry Yamada Takeshi went through the plum tree, snapped it at the base, and scattered the standing stones like somebody had kicked over a board game. I got one clean shot at him. Spinning back kick, full 360, into the side of his neck. He caught my shin in midair and threw me into a concrete wall. And that is where it happened. Upside down, backwards, half a second from impact, with absolutely nothing I could do about any of it. Unlock skill, Jiu-Jitsu level 0. The sacrifice technique and the finishing technique are yin and yang. They turn into each other at any moment. I hit the wall, and I rolled off it the way the man on the disc had shown me, and I came up on my feet in the sand with my ears ringing, and I was smiling. All right, monster. Help me grow. We fought for an hour. Not an exchange, not a round. An hour in a wrecked courtyard, with one man roaring like a bull and gasping between roars, and the other one breathing through his nose like he was on a morning walk. That was the number that decided it. Not strength, not speed, wind. He was running on something borrowed and it charged interest by the minute. I had physique 20 and 250 push-ups in the tank, and I had started to enjoy myself, which I understand is not normal. Jiu-Jitsu level 1 arrived somewhere in the middle of it, and after that, I stopped trying to hit him at all. Every time he grabbed me, I let him and turned and came out somewhere he did not want me. Every time he swung, I was closer than the swing was built for. He was fighting a man. I was fighting a problem. The end came off the wall. I let him rush me, put both feet on the concrete behind me, and pushed off it, and my legs went over his shoulders and crossed. Then all of my weight went backward and took his head with it, and we hit the sand together, and I had my ankles locked and my hips arched and his neck in between. He was enormously strong. It did not matter. He could not put his strength anywhere. The blue-black color drained out of him. The muscle went down under my legs like air leaving something, and the man in my arms got smaller, and then he stopped moving. Stop! The young woman in the white dress was in the courtyard, in a bathrobe now, screaming into a phone. I let go and checked he was breathing and sat back in the sand. The ambulance came in 11 minutes. I stood out in the street while they carried a national karate champion out of his own house on a board. The club sent me to charm a major client, I thought, and I have put him in hospital. How are those two things even connected? Then I remembered the memorandum I had signed before the fight, in triplicate, with his personal seal on it, and I stopped shaking. The tally came in that night while I was icing my shoulder. The Jiu-Jitsu level 1 reward was 5 free points or an effect called elasticity, which raises maximum leg flexibility by 60%. I took the effect. My right shoulder was out of its socket and I still took the effect, because points are a fish and effects are a rod, and I had made that decision once already and was not going to relitigate it every time I got hurt. I got the shoulder put back at a bone-setting clinic on Juchang Street, run by an old man called Master Gao, who had hands like tree roots and a manner like a customs officer. 4 weeks, he said. No lifting, no training. Then he pressed along the joint and stopped and pressed again. 1 week, he said slowly. What do you eat? The other thing I worked out that night mattered more than either. I had been using potential activation wrong for 2 months. I had been treating it as a recovery button, a way to squeeze an extra 50 reps out of a training session. That is not what it is. Full health, full protection, zero pain, on demand, right in the middle of a fight. It is my own version of what happened to him in that courtyard. Mine just does not eat anything on the way out. Also, at some point that week, I made braised ribs correctly for the first time, and the panel gave me Culinary Arts Level 1 and an effect called Blade Flower, which improves finger dexterity and fine knife work. Thank you, panel. Very useful. I will remember that during my next attempt on my life. I went to see him 3 days later at a private clinic in Taijiang, because you should visit the men you put in hospital. It is basic manners. 2 bodyguards outside a VIP room. Inside, Yamada Takeshi was in a plaster collar with his arms out on pillows, wrapped up so thoroughly he looked like an exhibit. Multiple fractures, a month minimum, and that was the optimistic version. His fiancée sat by the window, Kim Yoon-ju from here, not from Japan. She left when I came in and did not look at me on the way past. He wanted to talk. He had clearly been waiting to. His family came from Wakayama and had been samurai a long time ago, back when that meant something and not a family crest on the wall. His grandfather was a karate legend, the kind of man who is a story in other men's books. There is footage of him breaking a bull's neck with a knife hand strike, and Yamada Takeshi watched that footage every day of his childhood. And Yamada Takeshi had no talent. By 18, he was losing amateur tournaments. His cousin, 2 years younger, was already being called the future of the family. So he stopped. He went and studied literature. which he told me about in the flat voice of a man describing someone else's life. Then, a representative from a pharmaceutical company came to see him. They said the drug acts on the pituitary, he said. A hormone. It breaks the body's limits. Phase 3 trials. I signed a confidentiality agreement. You know what happened next, because you can see it from here. National championship. Invitation to the promotion. The press gave him a name, the Long of Waka, and for 4 years he was the man his grandfather had been. Then the bill arrived. His hair came out. His nose bled for no reason. His heart went at rest. And under all of that, the part he actually lowered his voice for. Without the injection there is anxiety, he said. Then rage. Then hatred. Of nothing. Of everyone. He looked at the ceiling. It is like something lives in my heart and eats the softness out of me. The pity. It eats that first. He told me he used to keep insects in a jar and crush them one at a time, in private, so he would not do it to a person. I sat there with my hands on my knees, and I did not say anything, because what do you say? The night it broke was the send-off before a world tournament. His cousin got drunk and said something small and jealous, and the transformation took him, and he nearly killed him. He put 3 members of his own family in hospital that night. What stopped him was an honored guest his grandfather had invited, somebody who took hold of him and held on, and he could not remember who it was. He said that part twice, like a man checking a lock. That is how he lives now. If someone holds him down in that state, or knocks him out of it, the thing in him goes to sleep for a long time. That is why I waited for Guo Peng, he said. A champion, someone with the strength to stop me. And then you came. I asked why he did not go find the company. The medicine arrives, he said, from a different address every time. Before I left, I told him the only thing I had that was worth anything. Your opponent is not out here. When I went past my own limit, everything ugly in me turned into fuel. That is all it is for. His face did something complicated. My grandfather called that the union of heaven and man. Where I come from, I said, we would call your version deviation of ki. He laughed, and then he stopped, because laughing hurt. On my way out through the lobby, I felt somebody watching me, and I looked up at the windows of the ward block, and one of them had a figure standing in it. By the time I had crossed the car park, the window was empty. The next week I bought a book called New Japanese Language Course, sat down with it at 8 in the evening, and turned on focus and speed reading together. I finished the entire textbook that night. Unlock skill, Japanese level 0. At Spirit 20, the skill drain that used to give me a headache after 1 hour had become something I could barely feel. That is the compounding I never see coming. I raise a number for fighting, and it pays me out in a completely different room. After that, I started visiting Yamada Takeshi just to talk, because I needed conversation practice and he needed to not be alone with himself. We discuss martial arts and life, and the secrets of the universe, which is a subject 2 men in a hospital room are extremely qualified to solve. Also that week I did 700 squats and got squat level 1 to 226 out of 250, and made a genuinely good braised fish, and if you had asked me then, I would have told you my life was finally getting simple. I went back to the bone setting clinic on a Tuesday night and walked into a waiting room full of injured criminals. Brother, he was there. Of course he was. He had an elbow he was holding like a wounded bird, and behind him were 6 of his associates in various stages of assembly. Master Gao was working through them with the enthusiasm of a man doing paperwork. Then he glanced up at me and had an idea. My student will set that one, he announced. Brother, he turned around with a friendly, curious expression. Which student? That would be me, I said. I have never seen a room lose the ability to speak that fast. I asked Master Gao if we could put some music on to help the patients relax. He put on the radio, and the radio was playing opera, the long wailing kind. And I would like to formally apologize to Brother, he's elbow, because I needed several attempts and the soundtrack did not help either of us. Who is next? I said, wiping my hands. Not one hand went up. Unlock skill, bone setting level 0. It was while I was working through them that I learned the 2 pieces of news that ended that part of my life. A new gang had come up in Dongdu called the Red Long. Aggressive, organized, and cruel in a way the local outfits found unprofessional. They had swallowed the viper he whole in under a month, and Xiao Han had been badly hurt. December the 17th arrived with banners in the shopping mall and a press pen in the lobby, and my day started very well. Squat level 2. Great master. 9 free attribute points. And I did not spend them. I sat with that panel open for a while and then closed it, because Guo Peng was going to be standing in my building in 4 hours, and I wanted to know what I was actually worth, not what I could be worth after shopping. 9 points is a lie you tell yourself about your own ability. Also, my hair was still coming out in the shower, and Yamada Takeshi's voice was in my head, telling me not to walk his road. Cleaning level 1 arrived that morning too, from mopping the same floor for 6 months, with an effect called Scavenger's Eye. I read the description, decided it was the most useless thing I had ever been given, and closed the window. Remember that. I want credit later. I was doing my shift when Manager Chin came around the corner at a speed his shoes were not designed for. Wei Hao, Yamada Takeshi has disappeared. He has multiple fractures. He has disappeared, said Manager Chin. The ward was made up like a hotel room. Clean sheets, corners folded, nothing on the table. A nurse told me the rest in the corridor with her voice down. Around midnight, the power in that wing had gone out. Not the whole hospital, that wing. The generators did not pick it up for 4 minutes, and when the lights came on, the 2 bodyguards were on the floor unconscious, and the bed was empty. His fiancée left at 5 in the evening, she said, before it happened. Who came after? Police. She hesitated. In plain clothes, and some other people. Nobody said who they were with. They took the recordings. I drove out to the house in Wenchuan district and rang the bell for a long time. Nothing. The gardener was gone. The red sports car was gone, so I went over the wall. The gardens were dark. The courtyard was still wrecked from our fight, the plum tree lying where it had fallen, and nobody had cleaned any of it up, which told me more than the empty driveway did. I went in through an unlocked side door and moved through a house with no lights on and no people in it. And on the second floor, in the corridor, something came out of the dark at my head. I heard the baton before I saw it, and I went into a roll, and it took a piece out of the wall where my temple had been. He was in black, tight suit, mask, no gaps. And when I came up, he already had a butterfly knife open and moving, and he put 3 points at me in 1 second. 1 second. 3. I have fought a national champion and a man on an experimental drug, and neither of them had ever put anything in my field of vision that I could not see, and this was a blur. The blade opened the back of my wrist. So I threw the baton away and hooked 2 fingers at him. Come on then. 2 attributes at 20, and I cannot catch 1 flea. He came, and I ran. Straight down the corridor, shoulder into a door, into a dark room. And he followed me through the doorframe because there was nowhere else to follow me through. And that was the entire idea. A doorway is a place where a man cannot step sideways. I put a round kick through it at chest height. He got the knife up to meet my shin, and my leg folded around it at an angle a leg is not supposed to reach, 60% more range than I had owned a week ago. And the blade only took my trouser leg. Then, the same leg came back and hit him in the face. I swept him, and I got his arm, and I broke it. He screamed, and the scream had words in it. I am a pursuer sent by the organization. I want to tell you that I hesitated, that there was a moment where I thought about the law degree, or my father, or what a person is supposed to do. There was not. I put my forearm across his throat, and I held it there, and I counted. Afterward, I sat on the floor of a dark bedroom in a rich man's empty house and waited to feel something. No nausea, no horror. If anything, I was a little bit excited. Terrific, I thought. So, that is in the blood after all. The pockets gave me a wallet, keys, a strip of chewing gum, the butterfly knife, which I kept, and a black semi-automatic pistol. He had a gun the whole time. He never drew it. He was that confident. Boxing plus 20, Sanda plus 70, Jiu-Jitsu plus 70. Then I cleaned the room, and this is where I have to admit something. I used detergent and a strong salt solution, because salt sets the proteins and lifts what water will not. I did not look that up. I knew it. It was just sitting in my head with all the other things I have never been taught. And when I turned on Scavenger's Eye, the world went dark red, and everything that did not belong lit up white. One of my hairs on the carpet, another one by the door frame, a cuff button that had come off my sleeve and rolled under a wardrobe 2 meters away, glowing like a small moon. I picked up every single one of them. The most useless skill I had ever been given had just taken 10 minutes off a life sentence. His keys opened Yamada Takeshi's car, which told me who had been sitting in this house waiting for whoever came looking. I drove north with a heavy bag in the back and no license, and the panel gave me driving level 0 somewhere on the ring road and started counting kilometers like a taxi meter. The upper reaches of the Hai Shui River run past the foot of Sishan, black water in a black cut in the hills, and there is a bend up there where the current comes off the rock and goes down. The bag went in and the water closed over it, and it was very quiet afterward, and the mountain was up there with a burnt patch on it that the news had stopped talking about. I stood on the bank and said it to the water, and to the organization, to the pursuers, to whoever had turned the lights off in a hospital wing. Wait for me to get stronger. Sooner or later, every one of you is going to stand in front of me, one at a time. Then I hid the car in an abandoned bamboo mill outside a village and took the first bus back into the city, and I got to work 11 minutes late. I missed the masterclass entirely, which is a sentence I get to live with forever. By the time I got back to the club, the banners were coming down and the press had gone, and Guo Peng was in the changing room with his agent, and I stood outside the door long enough to hear something I was not supposed to hear. Next year I go into film, he said. The agent said something quiet. What is the difference? Guo Peng said. Boxing in a ring, boxing in a movie, it is all for an audience, as long as they pay. A pause. We announce after the title fight. Then he came out with a bag over his shoulder, and I let him get all the way down to the underground car park before I put the mask on. He heard me at 20 meters. Give him that. Mr. Guo, I said, I am a fan. I have come to challenge you. He put his bag down. He was not scared. He was annoyed, and under the annoyance he was curious, because a man does not get to the top of two sports without wanting to know. I opened with a round kick, and he stepped off it, and my shin hit the side of a parked utility vehicle and left a dent in it you could set a cup in. 2, maybe 3 centimeters into the body panel. He looked at the dent. Then he looked at me. Then he got serious. For about a minute, it was the best fight I had ever had because he was better than me. Not stronger, better. His footwork was a different species from mine, and twice he made me miss by moving 4 centimeters, and I understood in real time why he had belts and I had a mop. And then it stopped mattering, because he could not hurt me, and I could hurt him. I got him in a clinch and put him over my shoulder onto the concrete, and I came down with a round kick and stopped at half an inch from his face. His hair moved. We stayed like that. Me holding a leg in the air, him on his back with his hands up, breathing hard. And I heard myself ask the question, and I honestly do not know which of us it upset more. You are a world champion in boxing and kickboxing, I said. Why are you so weak? Boxing plus 10, Sanda plus 10, Jiu-Jitsu plus 15. That was the scale I had been looking for. A world champion is roughly Yamada Takeshi on a normal day. Yamada Takeshi transformed is far above that. And the man in black in the dark house was above him. I was somewhere in the middle of a ladder I had thought was the whole world. Guo Peng did not get up. He lay there on the concrete looking at the ceiling of the car park. You have seen them too, he said. The monsters. I took my foot down very slowly. He told it lying flat, in a voice with no performance in it at all. The night of the explosion he had been on, Zishan with 2 friends, staying at Gufeng Temple. Guest rooms, old building, 120 years of tiles on the roof. At 3 in the morning, the roof moved. Not shook, moved. Tiles came off it and broke on the ground outside. And when he got the door open, there was a wall of fire on the mountain, and trees going down in rows kilometers away. 2 things came out of the fire, he said. They were fighting while they ran. I did not say anything. They were fast like a bullet is fast. One of them went through a wall, not a door, a wall. The other one waved an arm and threw it back over the trees. He swallowed. Then a brick came off the temple and hit my friend, and he died in the courtyard while I was holding him. And they went past you. They went past us, he said, like men walking past ants. The police classified it a special case. He was told, in a room, by people who did not give names, that he would not be discussing it. Then he sat up and looked at me properly. You are stronger than me, he said. I am not too proud to say it, but to that thing, you are a slightly larger ant. He got his bag. At the ramp he stopped. A dream is a target, he said. It can be very far away. That is fine. But if you cannot see the target at all, why would you draw the bow every day? He was talking about the movie deal. He was telling me why he was quitting. I put my hand out and pulled him up off the floor of that car park. Mr. Guo, I said, then let me do it for you. I will challenge those monsters. I will go to the top of this world. He looked at my hand for a while, after he was already standing. On the bus home, 2 office workers were arguing about the black rain over Sishan, the one everyone had photographed and nobody could explain. The Meteorological Bureau said ash particulate from the fire. Sure, ash. The next morning I did 1-arm push-ups in the mud at the park until my palm printed the ground. Push-up level 2. Great master. And an effect called Master of Strong Wrists, which doubles the flexibility and durability of the wrists. Then I opened the 9 points I had been saving since squat level 2 and spent them, and it turned out that was a mistake, and I found out in the most public way possible. I put 5 into strength. 20. The moment it landed, my body swelled. Not like the gym, like Yamada Takeshi in that courtyard. My arms went thick and hard and hot, and my shirt got tight across the back, and I stood there in a public park at 6 in the morning, inflating. So I panicked and dumped 4 into agility. 20. And everything reversed. The whole mass compressed inward, out and then in, like rough iron being poured into a mold and coming out as steel. In about 4 seconds, I went from a bodybuilder to a man who just looks well built, and every single fiber of me had been reorganized. I threw 2 test jabs. They cracked, like small fireworks. That was not the air. That was my own tendons and joints snapping through the movement faster than they were designed to. Strength 20, agility 20, physique 20, spirit 20. Then I noticed the draft. My tracksuit trousers had split down the entire seam during the strength phase, and had been that way for some time, and there were now 4 people doing Tai Chi about 30 meters away. I have never put a jacket around my waist so fast. I left that park at a dead sprint with dew on my legs, and behind me, somebody called out asking if I was all right, and I did not stop to answer. The panel had given me the body of a weapon, and it had also cost me a perfectly good pair of trousers, and I want you to understand that this is going to keep happening. By 9 that morning, I had eaten 20 steamed buns and 4 cartons of soy milk. Then I opened the refrigerator and ate everything meat-shaped in it and drank 2 liters of milk, and I still had that hollow feeling, like a man who has forgotten to eat for several days and has just remembered. Gourmet plus 30. Even my hunger was farming experience now. Lesson learned and written down. Never break through 2 attributes at once again. The body has to pay for it in food, and it pays immediately. The aunties at the bathhouse had gone quiet about me. Not respectful quiet, the other kind. Ling Wei came out onto the landing with a plastic box and stood there while I decided whether to notice her. I made shumai, she said. 6. Her father had banned her from the night market. Several killings in the district in 1 month, and Inspector Chen had come home and put his foot down. So she had decided she would learn to cook instead and open a breakfast stall in the morning when the world is safer. I ate one standing in the corridor. Not bad, I said. About half my level. She made a small round shape with her mouth and could not find a single word to put in it. I took the box with me. I started going to the Dongdu Public Library the way other men go to a bar. 5 floors, over 1 million volumes, the biggest public collection in the country. I filled a table with anatomy, physiology, rehabilitation medicine, kinesiology, and then went to a different floor entirely and got the old material, the muscle and tendon change classic, the 5 animal frolics. I was not being romantic about tradition. I had a very specific problem. Yamada Takeshi's hair was falling out, and so was mine. And I had been raising 4 attributes with brute force and no maintenance, and I wanted to find a health preservation skill before my body sent me the same invoice it sent him. I read 10 books in 5 hours. Focus and speed. Reading together, and the pages went past under my thumb, the way notes go through a counting machine, and the man across the table stopped reading his newspaper to watch me the way you watch a dog that has started talking. Then I went and got 3 more textbooks. Desert language, Nanyang, Latin. That one was not for reading. That was inventory. 6 skills at level 5 makes a gold talent, and languages are cheap skills that I can level in a room. And I had started thinking about my slots the way an accountant thinks about a balance sheet. A woman in thin black glasses at the next table looked up when I stacked the language books. I did not notice at the time. I noticed later, when it mattered. I sparred a professional the next week and it went badly for him. Brother Jin is a real fighter. Regional level, hard hands, 10 years in. 3 rounds in, he had his hands on his knees and could not lift his arms, and I had not begun to sweat. Boxing level 2. 8 free points. I put all 8 in physique and did not think about it for a second, because Iron Fist doubles off physique, and Iron Bridge would too when it came, and physique is the only attribute that pays rent to every other room in the house. Strength 20. Agility 20. Physique 28. Spirit 20. Coach Guo caught me at the water cooler with a thermos of goji berries and tea, which is what men his age drink, and he laughed so hard he had to put a hand on the wall. Young people are so weak these days, he said. You have to nourish yourselves. He had exactly the same thermos. That month, my pay went past 50,000. Free schedule, base salary, benefits, 700 an hour and rising. 2 months earlier, I had been mopping around that man's beginner class. The Muay Thai department was where I learned to be afraid of myself. 2 Thai coaches took turns letting me hit the pads, and then they wanted body work, and they kept telling me harder, harder, stronger, come on. I could not. With strength 20, I was 1 bad decision away from breaking a professional athlete in half, and every time I loaded a kick properly, I had to consciously dial it back, and they could feel me doing it, and it insulted them. So I stopped hitting people and moved to the 400-kilo bag. Low kicks with the shin, elbows and knees, which is where the whole art lives. The Thais have a saying about the elbow being a knife and the knee being a hammer, and once you have felt the difference between a fist and a point of bone traveling at the same speed, you never quite go back. I hit that bag for an hour with a thought going around and around. When do I finally get to let go? When do I get one real fight? I have thought about that a lot since. Be careful what you train for. I returned Hisen's discs 4 days late, and he charged me for it, out of principle. Next Thursday, he said, ringing it up. There is a gathering. I will take you myself. A gathering of what? He did not answer that either. Instead, he pushed a stack of language learning material across the counter, and every single case had a woman in very little clothing on the cover. Foreign language study materials, he said. Hisen, do you know the best way to temper the will? He tapped the top case with 2 fingers, absolutely serious. Study while resisting temptation. I asked for the normal ones. He sighed like I had disappointed a teacher. Back bridge level 1 came in on a Sunday, and with it an effect called Iron Bridge. The spine and the back muscles gain rigidity equal to 50% of physique, and while the muscles are under tension, 100%. I sat on my floor and counted what I had collected. Rapid eye movement, Iron Fist, the aloof, elasticity, blade flower, scavenger's eye, master of strong wrists, Iron Bridge, 8 effects, hands like double my physique, A back like a plate of iron, legs that bend 60% further than they should, eyes that find a button under a wardrobe. There is an old story about a monk who trains until blades will not cut him. They call it the Golden Bell. I had always assumed that was a story people told about a man they had not watched train. I went to the park that evening and stood on my hands on the grass, and then I started lowering myself head down until my forehead touched and pressing back up. Two old men in the pavilion stopped their chess. "The boy holds a good stand," one of them said, in the tone of a man grading someone else's grandson. "Unlock skill, handstand push-up level 0. That was the 6th. Push-up, squat, pull-up, leg raise, back bridge, handstand push-up." The 6 arts of the prisoner were open, all of them, from a man who could not do 20 push-ups on a cold floor. I walked home the long way that night just to keep feeling it. I also made one decision, and it was the right one. I stopped using potential activation to squeeze extra reps out of tired sessions. Whatever that button spends, it is not free, and it is not stamina. It is drawn out of something further down, and I had watched what happens to a man who keeps writing checks against his own cells. From that night, it was for emergencies only. Latin level 0 arrived from watching films with the original audio, which is the laziest possible way to learn a dead language, and I regret nothing. 4 languages now. Japanese sitting at 75 out of 100, Nanyang, dessert, Latin. And then the panel showed me something it had never shown me before, in a small line under the skill list. Maximum skill slots, 25. I counted. 20 occupied. I sat down on the edge of my bed and felt the shape of the thing change again. This was never an unlimited machine. It had a shelf, and the shelf had 5 spaces left on it, and every stupid thing I unlocked out of curiosity was going to cost me something later. There were 2 ways out: synthesize skills into talents and free the slots. Or, for the special ones, fold them together into an exclusive skill, which the panel described in one line and did not explain at all. I made a list that night of what I was allowed to unlock from then on. It was a short list, and within 2 months I had broken every rule on it. At 3:45 in the morning, I woke up because somebody was screaming, not a person having a nightmare. It came through the rain from a few streets over, high and wrong, and going on too long, and there were several voices in it, at different distances, one after another. Then the screaming stopped and the running started. I got to my window and looked down at Juchang Street, which was under about 4 centimeters of water, and there was a figure coming up it at a speed no person moves. Black coat, hood, feet not making the sound feet make, and then it stopped in the middle of the flooded street and looked up. Its eyes were green, not reflecting green. Lit from the inside, the way a cat's eyes come back at you in headlights, except there were no headlights. There was nothing down there but rain and a broken street lamp. Its mouth was dark and wet, and then it smiled at me. A real smile, teeth showing, white and too sharp and too many, and it held the smile for about a second and a half. Then it was gone up the street and around the corner. I stood at my window with my hands on the sill for a long time. Then I went into the bathroom and ran the cold tap and put my whole face in it. And when I lifted my head, I saw myself in the mirror in a dark room. My own eyes were glowing, faintly, red under the brown. I put my hand over the tap and watched them, and they did not stop. And I understood exactly what had just happened in the street. That thing had not been checking whether I was a witness. It had looked up, seen my eyes, and smiled at me the way you nod at somebody in your own uniform. I did not sleep. At 6 I went out and worked the bag until the sun came up, and the panel handed me Muay Thai level 0, and I barely looked at it. The hotel was called the IKEA, 3 floors, the kind of place with a hand-painted price list. By 8 in the morning, there was tape across both ends of the street and about 200 people standing in the wet. The word going around the crowd was not murder. I got close enough to hear 2 officers talking, and then I watched a young policeman come out of the side door, walk 4 steps, put his hand on the wall, and be sick. 4 dead. 1 woman they could not identify at all. 3 men, and the crowd had already worked out the rest, because someone inside had said it out loud in front of a window. 2 of them had no heads. 1 had lost both arms and a leg. The thing everyone kept repeating, in the flat voice people use when a fact will not fit, was that there was no weapon. Whatever came in there had used its hands and its teeth. Inspector Wei Yu arrived like a man walking into his own kitchen. They called him the black-faced god in that district, and he earned it. He went straight through the tape, took 1 look at the young officer against the wall, and told him that if he could not hold his breakfast, he could hold the perimeter instead. Then he went upstairs, and about 4 minutes later, I watched him come down and be discreetly and thoroughly sick behind the van. He straightened his coat afterward and announced to no one in particular that his wife had made black chicken soup again, and had been far too generous with it. Nobody argued. Nobody would. They brought out the witnesses one at a time. The hotel owner, a hard-faced woman in her 50s, who by the third sentence I understood was the wife of a local gang boss and had been running rather more than a hotel. A male guest who had stopped making sense entirely and kept explaining to the officer that the walls had breathed. And then a woman who could barely stand up, with the gray look and the sunken eyes I had seen on people at the far end of a habit. Holding her hand was a thin girl in clothes several sizes too big. She had amber eyes. That is what I noticed first, and I do not know why. Amber, in a small face, and she was not crying. She was watching everything, carefully, the way you do when nobody is going to help you. They took the owner in as a suspect on a 48-hour hold, and I went over to Inspector Chen, who had known me since I was 7, and said the sentence that put me on the record forever. "Uncle Chen, I think I saw the killer last night." The district station smelled like cigarettes and floor cleaner, and they sat me down with a composite artist. Thin face, sharp cheekbones, hood up. When she turned the screen around, I said 80 or 90%, which was true of everything except the eyes, and I did not mention the eyes because there is no box on that form for the eyes. I was not there to help them. I want to be honest about that. I was there to find out what the police actually knew about the things on Zishan. The answer, from 2 hours of sitting in that room, was nothing. They knew there was a body count. They had a case number. And every single time it got interesting, somebody upstairs took the file, and everyone below that line had learned to stop asking. A fat officer they all called, the weasel made the position clear while eating a sunflower seed. "Another serial one," he said. "We do the paperwork and the big people do the rest. 15 years I have been filling in the first page of somebody else's book." Then the man in the holding chair started convulsing. He was the one who had bitten a piece off his section chief's ear the night before. He went rigid, then he started shaking hard enough to move the chair across the floor. And the weasel, who was closest, decided the humane thing was to unlock the handcuffs. I would like it on record that I stood up before the cuffs came off. The man came out of the chair and went for the weasel's face with his teeth, and got enough of it that the weasel went over backwards, and then he was through the gap and running down the corridor, and the corridor was where they had put the mother and the girl to wait. He went at them. He was not aiming for the door. He was aiming for the child. I came off my back foot and put a low kick through his lead leg. His shin broke. He went down 2 meters short of her and did not get up. And 3 officers landed on him, and somewhere behind my eyes the panel added 30 points to Muay Thai without any comment at all. The mother had not moved. She was not really in the room. The girl had. She had put herself in front of her mother. A thin child with frostbitten hands, standing between a grown man and the woman who could not stand up, and she had done it before I moved. On my way out, she caught my sleeve. Her fingers were cracked and red at the knuckles. Up close I knew her, and it took me a second, and then it landed. A bus stop. A garbage sack bigger than she was. A drunk with a lost tooth. "Thank you," she said. That was all. Then she went back and took her mother's hand. I went home and did something I had never done before. I pulled one hair out of my own head and laid it across the gap at the bottom of my door before I left in the morning. And every time I came back after that, before I touched the handle, I turned on Scavenger's Eye. The world went dark red, and I looked until I found that white thread lying exactly where I had left it. Then I checked the flat. Every room, every time. The pistol and the butterfly knife lived at the bottom of a drawer, inside a tin that had once held donkey hide glue, which is the least interesting object in any Chinese household. I got the specifications out of my uncle over dinner without him noticing by complaining about a film. Black Devil, 7.62, semi-automatic, 10-round magazine. And then I did something stupid and useful. I put the man in black in the room with me, shadowboxing, my flat, lights off. I built him out of memory, the tight suit, the 3 points a second, the way the blade moved before the arm did. He was too real. That is the only way I can say it. I have built champions out of discs and never felt anything. And this time, I felt the cut across my shoulder and flinched hard enough to hit the wall, and my heart was going like I was back in that corridor. I stood in the dark breathing and got angry. I killed you once. I will kill you twice. Unlock skill. Blade technique level 0. 3 slots left. He Sen picked me up on Thursday on a moped that was older than I was, and we drove 40 minutes out to Tianjin village. On the way, he told me about Xiaohan's father, mostly as a warning. Chin Chin runs the Gao family Tai Chi school. That week, he had taken his son apart in the courtyard in front of students. "Keep running with gangsters," he told him, "and one day, somebody breaks your legs and I will not come to the hospital." He also had a great-grandfather. That is the part He Sen dropped in as if it were nothing. The man had taken Qigong to what they call great accomplishment, served as a personal bodyguard to a president, and was the first director of the National Martial Arts Hall. That was 100 years ago, He Sen said. Now his great-grandson teaches Tai Chi to housewives. The Martial Arts Research Association met in a courtyard house with a stone table and a cracked screen wall. There were 5 of them. Guo Peng, Bagua Palm, 70-something, walked with his hands behind his back. Wei Jun, Xing Yi, a thick square man with a flattened nose. Wang Xuan, eagle claw, whose hands were the wrong shape. Chen Sen, white crane, tall and thin, and the only one wearing a jacket with a collar. And Chin Chin, Tai Chi, who did not stand up when we came in. Plus Hei Sen with his limp. Plus Xiao Han with his arm in a cast, sitting on the step, waving at me with the other hand. I stood in that courtyard and did the arithmetic. This is not a martial arts society. This is a nursing home crossed with a disabled persons federation. I said very politely that I was here to learn from my seniors and that if anyone wished to correct me, I would be honored. Nobody moved. That is not modesty. I know exactly what happened because I felt it happen. 5 old men looked at a 23-year-old standing in a courtyard, and something came off me that made all 5 of them decide simultaneously that today was not the day. Then Chen Sen put down his tea and went to fix that. He had a servant bring 6 beer bottles and set them upright on the stone. Then he stepped up onto the mouths of them, all his weight on the rims, and ran the entire white crane form on top of 6 bottles of glass without one of them shifting. Wang Xuan crushed a walnut in his fingers, which is a party trick. Then he took a porcelain teacup and did the same thing to that, which is not. Wei Jun had them hang a brick from a rope, and he did not swing at it. He extended his arm into it, one short thrust with almost no travel, and the brick came apart on the rope, and the halves swung. Then Guo Peng lowered himself into a horse stance and asked for the kettle. He held it in both palms at chest height and did nothing at all for about 40 seconds. White steam came off his shoulders and off the backs of his hands, curling up in the cold, and inside the kettle the water started to move, and then it rolled, and then it was boiling, and the lid began to knock. I have 28 physique. I know exactly what a human body can do. This was not that. So I walked over to the rockery in the corner, the ornamental limestone one they had probably had for 80 years, and I threw one straight right at the top of it. The top of it came off, not chipped, sheared the way it goes when you take a sledgehammer to it, and the pieces went down into the pond and the whole courtyard was quiet again for a completely different reason. Does he already know Qigong? Said Wang Xuan to nobody. They invited me to join the association on the spot. I said I had one condition. Can I learn Qigong too? While they were talking about it, Xiao Han leaned over from the step and put his voice down. It is real, he said, but it is weaker than you are imagining. Old Kai will not be able to train for 2 months after that kettle trick. Then why would they lie to me? I have no money and no connections. Xiao Han grinned at me with half his face. Because you have got somebody with you, he said, and would not explain it. After the food, when everyone else had gone out to the courtyard, Chin Chin took me into the back room, and Chen Sen came with us and closed the door. Chen Sen, it turned out, was also a professor of history and paleoanthropology at Dongdu University, which explained the caller. Chin Chin did not ease into it. You have learned boxing, sanda, jujitsu, muay thai, he said. You beat professionals. Why do you not compete? I said something about time. You do not compete, he said, because since your father's death, you have been looking for a road past the ordinary man. You want a way to fight those monsters. Am I wrong? The room got very small. We made inquiries about your father's case, he said. There is a great deal about it that does not fit. 17 years ago, that so-called serial killer was very probably hiding among those things. I did not say anything for a while. There was nothing in my throat. Chen Sen put his cup down. Which member of this association is not a victim of those monsters? He said. Then he corrected himself, and it was the correction that stayed with me for the rest of my life. No survivors, lucky ones. He talked for a long time, and I remember nearly all of it. The world looks peaceful, he said. And it is, mostly. And that is a mercy. But if you once look under the edge of the ice, you never live as an ordinary person again. In their eyes, we are livestock. All our money, all our connections, all our institutions. Sheep with bank accounts. Where does their power come from? I asked. Born with it, he said. Or they meet something and it is given in one night. Not like us, drop by drop over 40 years. What they have works like magic, like a miracle. It is not a hill you can climb with effort. It is a gap. And the association? We go through what our ancestors left, Chin Chin said. Health preservation, breathing, standing, the internal methods. We are looking for the one road that joins conditioning to cultivation, that remakes the body and the spirit together. Qigong is not mysticism. It is the science of human life, consciousness reaching down into physiology and giving orders. Then he gave me the honest warning, which is how I knew they were not selling anything. Your uncle's here, he said. Each spent about 10 years to see their first real progress. Do you still want it? I want it. The next morning I stood in a horse stance in the park and did nothing for 40 minutes. There is a saying, 3 years standing like a post before you throw a fist. I had heard it as a joke about traditional training. Standing there with my thighs on fire and my knees screaming and absolutely nothing happening, it stopped being a joke. The breathing is called long and leopard thunder sound. You produce a low roll out of the lower abdomen, and the vibration works through the organs and the deep tissue and repairs the damage training does. Chin Chin taught it to me using a cat. His cat is enormous, orange, and hates everyone. He put it in my arms and told me to hold it and stroke it until it started up, and then to put my hand flat on its ribs and feel where the sound was actually coming from. There, he said. Not the throat, there. So my introduction to a martial art 100 years old was a fat orange cat purring under my palm, while a 70-year-old man watched me like an examiner, unlock skill, stance training level 0. And the panel, in its infinite wisdom, filed it under fitness. Not internal arts, not cultivation. Fitness. I stood there in the park at 7 in the morning, arguing with a window only I could see. Sanda level 2 arrived that week, and the effect it gave me changed how I fight more than any number ever has. Dance of lightning. Every clean strike landed with the leg raises movement speed by 60%, stacking up to 10 times within a 5-meter radius. 60%. 10 stacks. Hit a man with a low kick and you are faster. Hit the next one and you are faster again. In a room with 10 people in it, by the 4th one you are not fighting them anymore. You are moving through them. It is a skill designed by somebody who wanted me surrounded. I found her at the bins behind the tube building, up on her toes, reaching for a can that had rolled to the far side and could not get there. I picked it up and put it in her sack. Next time, I said, just tip the whole bin over and take what you want first. Chinmei looked at me like I had suggested a bank robbery, and then she thought about it, and then she nodded very seriously. I bought her beef buns and we sat on the step while she ate 2, and put the 3rd one carefully in her pocket for later, which is a thing I have never been able to stop thinking about. Her name is Chinmei. She explained it to me with her mouth full. Wen as in gentle, Shin as in that Shin, not the happy one. She lives with her mother in the basement of our building, the one with the pipe running along the ceiling. We were still sitting there when 3 men came down the outside stairs and started hammering on the basement door. I got the substance from about 4 words. Either 100,000 as a transfer fee to the 3 wolves, or we take the daughter against the debt. I put the bag of buns down on the step. Dance of lightning is not a technique. It is a change in the frame rate of your life. I hit the first one, and I was already past the second. The fat one at the back went down against a wall in a way that made it look like he had been blown there. The third had a knife, and I did not take it off him. I put his own hand and the knife against his own throat and held them there. Then I took it, and I broke it in my fingers in half and dropped both pieces in the drain. Do not come to Juchang Street again. They went up those stairs fast enough to fall twice. Chinmei came out from behind the step. She was not frightened of me. That was the thing that got past my guard. She stood there, and then she dug in her pocket and put something in my hand. It was a card. Old, soft with handling, the colors mostly gone. There was an egg on it, and over the egg, a 6-pointed star. It is my lucky charm, she said. I have had it since I was little, so that trouble and danger do not touch you. I turned it over later. There was a date on the back in faded pen. The 1st of January, 1983. Her mother was called Qin Xia, 30 at most, and had been beautiful before. Whatever was eating her got started, and when I helped her back inside, she looked through me at the wall. 2 days later, there was an envelope under my door with no address on it. Inside was a postcard. The picture was nothing, some generic landscape. On the back, in careful handwriting, one line I could read. I hope to have the honor of hearing your voice. And under it, a row of symbols that were not any alphabet I had learned, and I had learned 4 that season. They looked like Latin letters that had been crossed with something older, with strokes going in directions. Letters do not go. I asked every neighbor on my floor. Nobody had seen anyone. Auntie Wong, who knows when a stranger crosses the street, had seen nobody. I put a second hair on my door that night. I took the postcard to the library because the library had a woman in thin black glasses who kept turning up at the next table. She was there again. Economics, political science, history of religion, folklore, archaeology, all in one stack, which is not what a person reads. It is what a person hunts. I put the card down in front of her and asked if she had ever seen writing like it. She looked at it for a long time before she touched it. I have never seen this, she said, but it is writing. It is not decoration and it is not nonsense. How can you tell? Because the unfamiliar parts feel related to each other. She turned it in the light. There is a school of thought that all human language shares a deep structure, that we are born with a frame and only fill in the vocabulary. If that is right, then a real script written by real people will always have a family resemblance, even when you cannot read a word of it. She tapped the row of symbols. This has it. She told me to read about the traditions that live outside the official ones. Nushu, the women's script, Taoist talismans, the rock inscriptions nobody has cracked. Then she added, as if it had just occurred to her, that there was a lecture over the New Year holidays by a paleoanthropologist of some international reputation, and that I might find it interesting. Something moved behind her eyes when she said it, just for a second. Chu Yue, she said. Junior lecturer here. Wei Hao. I work at a boxing gym as a sparring partner. She smiled at that in a way I did not understand for another month. Handstand push-up level 1. 6 free points, physique 30, and it was nothing. That is what I want to record. Going from 19 to 20 had reforged me from the inside out. Going from 28 to 30 was a comfortable little upgrade, like putting better tires on a car, which told me something. 20 is the wall. 20 is where an ordinary human body stops, and the panel had walked me through it and shut the door behind me. So, where is the next one? 50? 100? Strength 22. Agility 21. Spirit 21. And standing like a post was doing something I could not explain. I checked the hidden tab because the numbers looked wrong. Strength growth had gone from 37% to 45. Agility from 21 to 36. Spirit from 23 to 30. Weeks of work in days, and the only thing I had changed was 40 minutes of standing still. Standing does not train muscle. It trains the long connective chains, the deep tendon lines that run the length of you, and once those are loaded like a drawn bowstring, everything you hang off them improves at once. 3 years standing like a post before you throw a fist. I stopped laughing at that. Japanese level 1 arrived on the bus, worth 1 point of spirit, and Chin Fan caught me in the corridor at work with actual news. New Year, he said. The real boss is coming down personally to hand out red envelopes to the best staff. He paused for effect. You are on the list. There is a real boss? There is always a real boss, said Chin Fan. He sen taught me the Gao family form, 24 movements, and he taught it badly and beautifully, standing on one good leg and swearing at my elbows. Then, Zhao Han and I did push hands in the courtyard. He is enormous. Push hands with a man like that is like trying to redirect a car. We stuck and followed, circle after circle, and every time I tried to put force in, he ate it, and every time I retreated, he came with me. Adhere, follow, do not lose contact, do not resist. And then, 4 minutes in, I saw a gap in the circle. I cannot tell you what I did. It was not one of the 8 methods. It was not Tai Chi or Sanda or Jiu-Jitsu. It was a shape that fitted that particular hole at that particular instant. And Xiaohan left the ground and landed flat on his back with his cast in the air. Unlock skill, Tai Chi level 0. All roads arrive at the same place. I had heard that my whole life as a slogan. It turns out it is a mechanical description. Xiaohan lay on the flagstones and looked up at the sky. I want to ask you for something, I said. Anything except that again. Find me a shooting range. He turned his head very slowly. Within 7 steps a pistol is fast, I said. Inside 7 steps it is accurate. I would like to not be the slow one. He did not ask why. He knew about the postcard, and he had seen me put a hair across my own doorway. And he was a man who had spent his adult life around people who get followed. On the bus home, I saw Chinmei standing outside a shoe shop. She was not going in. She was standing at the glass with her sack behind her, looking at a pair of pink shoes with round toes and a flower on the strap. And when the bus pulled away, she was still there. My mother came up 2 days before the exam to feed me, because that is what she believes an exam requires. She brought a charm from Gufeng Temple on Xishan, tied with red thread, and she put it in my hand and closed my fingers over it. For luck, she said. Do not lose it like the last one. I let her cook. I let her tell me about the ward and about my grandfather's appetite and about my uncle's deal, which had now been about to close for 6 weeks. Then I put her on a bus back to the hospital before dark, and she was hurt by that and did not say so, and I did it anyway. Because there was a pistol in a tin in my drawer and a postcard from somebody who knew where I lived. Nobody is taking away the happiness that belongs to me. The exam was the 31st. 2 days, 4 papers. I sat in a hall with 300 people and answered questions about criminal procedure with my hand moving on its own. Then it was over, and I walked out into the cold with nothing left, standing between me and everything else. The Dongcheng Association keeps a resort at the foot of Xishan, and under the resort, they keep a shooting range built to military specification. Xiaohan drove. Chen Feng sat in the back, and I finally learned his name, and he is the blonde one from the hospital corridor, and he is now missing several teeth and has entirely forgiven me for it. The Dongcheng Association is one of the 3 oldest societies in Dongdu. Casino upstairs, men with automatic weapons standing in the corners of a room with a chandelier in it, and the reason we were welcome was that they had been having their own trouble with the red long he. Downstairs I was handed a pistol and a box of ammunition. My first shot was a 7. My finger hesitated. That is all it was. Having chosen a weapon, you cannot be thinking about mercy while you use it. Second shot, 8, then a 10, and another 10, and after that, I asked the range officer to move the target to 50 meters. He told me that was past the effective range of the weapon. My second shot at 50 meters went into the middle. Then they ran the moving targets. 1 minute, 30 hits, 18 in the center. Second run, 24 in the center. Marksmanship, level 1. and an effect called ghost shooting, which fuses the five senses with stance and movement, so that the shooter becomes unpredictable and can lay in a shot from angles that should not be available. The bill was educational, 30 yuan a round, 66 rounds, 1,980, and with the range fees 3,900. Then 3 magazines and 30 rounds at 50 each, plus a suppressor. Another 1,800. 6,000 yuan in one evening. 2 months earlier, that was more than I made in a month. We were walking out when the siren started, not police. This was a long, flat, rising note that came from the mountains and went through the buildings, and every man in that casino stopped moving. "Military air raid alarm," the weapons dealer said cheerfully, packing my box. "A monster came down off the western hills. Do not worry, the army holds a cordon up there, and those things are afraid of light, and we have a dozen floodlights on this roof." Then he heard himself say it, and stopped, and looked at me. Out past the car park, up in the black shoulder of the mountain, there were flashes, small and quick and repeating. The sound reached us about 4 seconds later, and it was gunfire. We went to the night market afterward because Xiao Han was in a mood, and I brought Chin Mei, and it was the first time in her life she had been in a car. She sat in the back with her sack held behind her legs where nobody could see it, hands flat on her knees, looking at the door handle like it might charge her for the ride. "Do not be nervous," I told her. "If either of these two dares to upset you, I will use my fist to make them genuinely disabled." Chen Feng swerved into the next lane. Xiao Han drank 10 bottles, and then he cried. It came out sideways, the way it does with big men. In the massacre where the Red Long swallowed the viper, they had killed Ah Kai, the thin, quiet one from the hospital elevator. They had killed the boss, who had taken Xiao Han in when he was 15, and who he had called older brother for 11 years. He had lived because he was face down under a table with a chair on top of him. "And Chin," he said, "tell me honestly, am I Xiao Han, the biggest piece of garbage alive?" I did not answer that, because there is no answer to it that a drunk man can hear. I peeled him a prawn and put it on his plate. Across the table, Chin Mei was eating chicken wings and stripping them down to white bone, methodically, one after another, and putting the bones in a neat row at the edge of her plate. Afterward, I walked her home, down the outside stairs to the basement. One room, a wooden bed, a table, and everything else on the floor. Something moved along the skirting when the light went on. Her mother was unconscious on the concrete beside the bed, and had been for a while. Chin Mei stood in the doorway with her hands behind her back, looking at me and not at the room. "Brother Wei Hao," she said, "will you look down on me?" I told her no. Then I told her that tomorrow, in the daytime, she was not to go outside for any reason. Then I went upstairs and knocked on the Guo family's door and asked Ling Wei for a favor. The lecture was in a hall that seats 600 and it was full. Professor Qin Kai is an archaeologist with an international name, and the title on the screen was The Common Origin of World Languages and the History of Human Evolution. He talked for 40 minutes about something called the primal mother vowel, the basic throat sounds of the plateau tribes from the era the old texts call the flood, not words, sounds that came before words. E is a horizontal line, the earth running east to west, the one. O is a circle, the sky, and time without an end to it. I is a ladder, standing between the sky and the man underneath it. Put the three together, he said, and you have the name of the maker in the old desert tongue. Then he said he was going to play a recording. It was made from inscriptions found in an underground chamber on Sishan, and the colleague who had produced the reconstruction was currently in hospital with auditory hallucinations, and Professor Qin Kai delivered that fact in the same voice he used for his citations. The lights went down, the sound that came out was low and long and went on much further than a human breath. Muon. And something in my head twitched like a string being plucked. I felt a door move, not open, move, the way a heavy door moves when the pressure changes in the next room, and then the tide came in through the gap. All 4 language skills started rising at once, in real time, while I sat in a lecture theater with my hands on my knees. Nanyang level 1, Desert level 1, Latin level 1, Spirit 22, became 25. Then my skull tried to split along the middle, and I was pouring sweat in a cold room, and the lights came up, and 600 people applauded politely and filed out talking about lunch. Qiu Yue was waiting in the corridor. She held out a black fountain pen that was not a fountain pen. "I copied everything from the tape," she said. "Listen to it for a couple of days." She had made a recording of a lecture before it happened. She handed it over as if it were a pen she had borrowed. I took it and thanked her, and she watched me walk away. And I have since been told what she was thinking, and it was, apparently, that she was going to have to wait a little longer. I tried the tape at home that night in the dark and got Japanese level 2 out of it, worth 2 more points of spirit, and then a needle went through my brain from front to back and I switched it off. 2 days later, it was Chin Mei's birthday, and none of us knew that until Ling Wei found out. I came home to ribbons in the Guo family's doorway. Ling Wei had already collected Chin Mei, washed her, and put her in a wool dress with a hood that she had worn herself at that age. And there was a cake on the table that she had spent the entire morning building and rebuilding. My contribution was a shoebox. Chinmay opened it and found the pink shoes with the round toes and the flower on the strap. And she did not say anything at all. She bit her lip, and it did not help, and she put her hand over her eyes. She asked if she could go and get her mother. She went down and knocked for a while, and came back alone, and said her mother was sleeping, and nobody in that room made her explain any further. 12 candles. Do not say the wish out loud, Ling Wei told her, or it will not come true. Grandmother Chen watched her serial through the whole thing and told us to move because we were in front of the television. The Chamber of Commerce fireworks started at 9, and we went up onto the roof and sat on the water pipes. That flower is so big, Chinmay said. I never knew fireworks were beautiful, said Ling Wei, who had lived here her whole life. I have only ever heard them through the wall. Sometimes you only have to change where you are standing, I said. Then the world shows you a different side of itself. They both moved a little closer, one on each side, which I noticed and pretended not to. That was the last completely good night for a long time. The roof became my gym after that, the flat part behind the concrete water tank where nobody goes. The program was as follows, and I am aware of how it sounds. Frog jumps up the stairwell from the first floor to the 9th 20 times, 500 one-arm pull-ups, 500 hanging leg raises, 300 bridges, 150 handstand presses, 600 one-arm push-ups, Muay Thai level 1. Effect, steel bones. Elbows, knees, and shins gain 60% additional durability from physique, which put those points of me at the equivalent of 48. I tested it on the standpipe that runs down the side of the building. The low kick made a noise the whole block heard, a deep ringing that went up and down 9 floors of plumbing and left a flat dent in cast iron. Then, I put an elbow into the parapet and took a chip out of the concrete. I took the skin off my forearm doing it and did not feel it happen. Note to self, I wrote that night. Remember client safety. Chinmay did not want to go home in the new dress. I understood why, about 4 seconds after we got down the basement stairs, because her mother was sitting on the floor with a bruise across one cheek and both wrists marked, and she had been sitting there waiting. And in front of her, on the concrete, was a small chocolate cake with one red candle in it. I do not know where in that district a woman in her condition finds a cake at that hour, and I have thought about it many times, and I still do not know. She looked up at me and put her hands together. My name is Chin Xia, she said, and I will remember your kindness. Then, quietly to the floor. I was not always like this. I love my daughter very much. At the end of the month, the club put up a banner and lined the staff up in rows, and the real boss came down. Chairman Chin is an old man in a tangzhuang jacket with a white beard, and he moved through that hall with 4 men in black spaced around him like furniture. He announced a pay increase for March. Everybody applauded. Then he handed out the red envelopes personally, and when he got to me, he stopped. Young man, he said, I have heard about your progress. Keep going. Perhaps we will meet again. And the bodyguard on his left changed, not visibly. Nobody else in that hall saw a thing. But the man went absolutely still in the way an animal goes still, and he did not look at my face, he looked at my center, and every hair on my arm stood up. He was not sizing up a threat. He had met something larger than himself, and his body had reported it before his brain could stop it. There was 20,000 yuan in the envelope. I found out later what was said in the car. His assistant asked whether I was really worth investing in. I trust Mr. Yamada's judgment, Chairman Chin said. And then, going through a file, that apart from a father who was a murder suspect, the boy was clean. Then his phone rang, and it was the news that the Red Long, he had swallowed another small outfit that week. A tiger that hides its claws too long, said Chairman Chin. Stops being seen, it is time to stretch. Zhao Han went looking for his dead boss's wife in the Lingang flea market and walked into a brothel that was a trap. And they took him for a customer and led him through a door that was not a door. The room behind it was 300 or 400 square meters. Conveyor lines, men in masks, bags of white powder stacked to the ceiling on pallets. Then the door shut behind him, and somebody said the word spy, and 40 men picked up machetes. I was outside. The hidden door was steel plate on a reinforced frame, and it was locked, and I did not have a key. I hit it 4 times. On the 4th, it came off its mountings and went into the room and took 2 men with it. Han, I said, stepping through. From here, it is mine. You just concentrate on healing. I put a low kick through the first man's leg, and it folded the wrong way at the middle. Then I let Dance of Lightning run. I have tried to describe what that is like, and the best I can do is this. Every clean leg strike makes you 60% faster, and it stacks 10 times. And in a room with 40 people in it, there is always another target inside 5 meters. By the 4th man, the room slows down. By the 7th, you are not choosing targets, you are simply moving. And everywhere you pass through, men fall over. They said afterward that the hospital that night looked like an orthopedic conference. 40 men, half a minute, Then somebody produced a pistol, and somebody else a shotgun, and Xiaohan and I ended up pinned behind a machine while wood and plaster came off the wall above us. I counted. When the one with the pistol dropped his magazine out, I came around the machine and put 2 rounds in, both in the forehead, at 11 meters, in the dark. Muay Thai, plus 45, Sanda, plus 40, boxing, plus 30. Behind another door at the back, there were women and children locked in, and one of them was Xiaohan's sister-in-law, who he had been looking for since the night his gang died. We took the 2 shot men away with us, because a shooting brings a different department. We took the 2 floor bosses as well, for later. Everything else we left for the police. Then I called Inspector Chen, who came from a district that had no jurisdiction over any of it, looked at me for about 6 seconds, and told us both to go home. Somewhere across the city that same night, in a cold room behind 2 steel doors, a man called Deng Yu was beating one of his own managers for losing a shipment and telling him that next time he would be fed to the monster. He was not speaking figuratively. Upstairs in that building, there was a refrigeration unit, and inside it, a glass tank full of bubbling fluid, and inside that, a naked man over 2 meters tall in restraints made of thin steel. His skin was blood dark. His muscle was piled wrong. His eyes moved behind the glass, and every so often he made a sound that came up through the floor. He had been the Red Longhe's best assassin until he went over the edge and killed several of their own people with his teeth. They kept him under with a blue fluid injected into the side of the neck, and they were waiting for a group of people to come and collect the sample. I bought a second recorder for over 2,000 yuan and copied the tape onto it, and then I sat down on my floor in the dark and turned on focus and pushed. The first syllable hit like lightning going down a wire, and the information came at the dam of my mind and hit it flat. The second syllable took the room away. I was in the void. No up, no down, no past, no future. Nothing to stand on and nothing to see by, and things were coming up out of the mud that I could feel but not look at. The third syllable put me back on Dongdu Boulevard, my street, exactly as it is, buses and shop fronts. And then the same street a decade earlier. And then further and further, epoch after epoch. Peace and war and machinery and men in skins, dynasty after dynasty, running backwards through the same ground I walk on every day. Warning: information complexity exceeds tolerance. Negative elements detected. Filtering required. Nanyang level 2, Desert level 2, Latin level 2, Japanese level 3, maximum, and an effect. Spell resistance. 100% additional resistance to curses, temptation, and hostile intent. And at the very end, one last picture that I have never been able to shake. An animal more than 10 meters tall, breaking ancient trees as it moved. And around it, at its feet, men in hides with spears and bows, coming at it on purpose. They were going to die, and they knew it, and they went anyway. That is what the sound is, not a spell and not a curse. It is memory from the source, handed down through blood by people who wanted their descendants to remember what we are. And it is a hymn loud enough to scatter anything darker that tries to sing over it. So, I ran both recorders at once for 5 minutes at maximum, which was a decision I made while unable to feel my own hands, and pushed all 4 languages to level 3. I came out of it with an empty skull, half an hour of cotton wool where thinking is supposed to happen, Spirit 33. And then the panel gave me something it had never given me before. Congratulations. You are awakening a brand new gift. Omniscient language, purple, epic. The bearer commands the language of any thinking being, and will instinctively decipher a phrase or a line of script on hearing it once. 400% additional resistance to verbal negative abilities. 400%. The panel put a note underneath, because it enjoys itself, equivalent to over 100 spirit. I had 33. I looked at the postcard again the next morning, and this time the row of symbols was not symbols. It was an incantation, and it was not a curse, and it was not a summons. It was closer to an address, a password that lets you into a private room, the way you would be handed a phrase to get through a door. I read it out loud. The world went out. I was standing in a fog so thick it had weight, and there was wind in it, and under the wind the sound of surf a long way off, and inside the fog, things moved that did not want to be looked at directly. Above me, there were lights, points of them, hanging at different distances, some steady and bright, some so faint they were barely there, some so far away they were only a suggestion. The brighter the light, I understood, the stronger the mind behind it. I went toward the dimmest one. As I got close, it stopped being a light and became a gate, a manor gate, dark wood with carving on it, standing on its own in the fog. I raised my hand to knock, and I stopped. I do not know why, something in the grain of the wood, or the quality of the quiet behind it. I stood there with my hand up, and then I took it back, and I walked away, and let go of the whole thing, and I was on my own floor with my ears ringing. Across the city, in a villa on Daogu Street, a beautiful young man was sitting inside a ring of candles with his eyes closed. He opened them. "Why not come in?" he said to an empty room. "I am hospitable to my own kind." And there was a green flash behind his eyes. Somewhere else entirely, a woman in a silk slip sat up in bed in the dark and put her hand flat on the sheet. "He still has not contacted his girl," she said. "Even for a beginner, that is strange. His reading speed already broke the memory ceiling, and he meditates well enough. All he has to do is pronounce those few words correctly. He does not need to be taught mantras at all." Pull-up level 2 arrived with 10 points, and I put every one of them into strength 32, agility 21, physique 30, spirit 33. I tested it on the coal cylinder in the corridor, the half-empty one, by hooking one finger under the rim and lifting. Then I switched to the little finger because the index had felt too easy and stood there holding 30 kilograms of steel off the floor by one small finger at 3 in the afternoon in a hallway like an idiot. That week, I got Chinchia a job. Master Gao needed someone to keep the front room and wash the cloths, and he did not ask a single question about her, and she came in on the first morning with her hair tied back and her hands shaking and stayed all day. Xiao Han told me who Master Gao used to be, over noodles, in the tone of a man who is enjoying himself. 17 years ago, Go Chang Fu was a name, not a boss. The first blade of the Liang King gang, which had more enemies than it had members, and by the end of it, there was a body count on him, about equal to the number of men who wanted him dead. Then he stopped and opened a bone-setting clinic on Juchang Street and started charging pensioners 40 yuan to fix their shoulders. "That old man," Xiao Han said with real affection, "has put more people in the ground than this entire district put together." I unlocked acupoint striking level 0 and Twina massage level 0 on the same afternoon, practicing on Brother He's associates, who kept coming back with new injuries and had become a kind of teaching hospital for me. Xiao Han refused to let me touch him. "You will break my bones," he said, backing toward the door. "With love, but you will break them." The abandoned factory in the Jiangbei suburbs was Xiao Han's own place, and it came with a German shepherd that had bitten 4 people. It took one look at me, lay down flat, and put its chin on the ground. Animals talk, it turns out. They simply do not have a complete system to do it with. And when you have a talent that reads any language a thinking thing produces, you find out that a dog announcing surrender is doing exactly that, with grammar. We had 2 prisoners from the powder plant, kept in separate rooms, and I went back and forth between them for 3 hours. Way he runs people. Women, mostly, kept compliant on what he sells them, and organs when a buyer appears. His boss is Deng Yu, who used to run the smuggling on the Lingang docks and has now come into the Red Long He and been given territory for it. And the head of the Red Long He is a man whose surname is Wei, and the way both of them said his name told me more than anything they said about him. When I had everything, I set both of their broken bones properly and bandaged them, and explained what I was doing as I went, because I had a new skill, and they were the only patients available. By the end of it, one of them was crying and telling the other one what a kind person I was. Meanwhile, across the district, Deng Yu's people were putting the pieces together. Somebody recognized Xiao Han. Somebody else described a handsome young man who fought with his legs. Juchang Street is 3 Wolves territory. Therefore, the handsome young man is a 3 Wolves man. Therefore, the 3 Wolves have a hidden assassin nobody has ever seen. They asked the Red Long, He for an assassin of their own. I sat in on one of Chu Yue's lectures once, out of curiosity. She was teaching that consciousness is the tip of an iceberg, and that most of what runs a person happens below the waterline, and then she got on to lucid dreaming. "If any of you discovers you have that ability," she said to a hall of undergraduates, "develop it. You may become something more than human." Everyone laughed. She did not. Afterward, she gave me the recorder back at the university gate, and then she stepped in close and looked up at me. "Wei Hao," she said, "look me in the eyes." I looked her in the eyes. She has beautiful eyes. That is the only thing that happened. Something crossed her face very briefly, and it was not embarrassment. It was the specific irritation of a professional whose tool has failed for the 3rd time. I found out later she had been trying to charm me since the library, that she had done it to men far stronger than me and had it work, and that at the moment she was standing there with a spell coming apart in her mouth, I was carrying 400% verbal resistance and had no idea any of it was happening. Her lecture notes had a drawing in the margin. A man at a library table, turning a page. I spent a whole day walking Lingang before I moved on Wei He. The useful thing turned out to be the car park attendants outside the Jinsha sauna. I talked to them in Xihei dialect, which is what they spoke at home 800 kilometers away, and had not heard from a stranger in 9 years, and after 4 minutes, they told me everything they had. Wei. He was in hiding, but he would come back for the women because the women were the inventory. That night, the 2 gangs met in a private room at the sauna, and I was above the ceiling panel. Wei He wanted the 3 Wolves to hand over Xiao Han and the hidden assassin, plus 80 million in compensation. Bull, who was 3 Wolves and built like his name, told him what he could do with the 80 million and left. And Wei he said, to the closed door, what he intended to do to that man's family once this was finished. He had a list. It was collateral and it was leverage, and he laid it out like a man planning a delivery. I caught the one they call Bladeface in the corridor first, the one who had recognized me in the market, and I walked him back into that room ahead of me. Then I cut Wei He's throat. Then I put the knife in Bladeface's hands and folded his fingers around it. Go on, I said. Hit him a couple of times. He did, because a man will do almost anything in the first 4 seconds. Then I told him he had a choice: walk into a police station as a witness, or walk into the Three Wolves and tell them what he had seen. I did not much mind which. Then I opened the door and shouted down the corridor, "The Three Wolves assassin is here. Who is first?" They came. I put them down in the doorway, one after another, and left through the fire exit while the shouting was still going on behind me. By morning, 2 gangs were at war, and there was a killer in the middle of it who worked for the Three Wolves and did not exist. The next evening, Chinmei was sitting outside my door, on the cold concrete with a cardboard box on her knees. "Guess what is inside?" she said. "An apple." "No, a mouse. A mouse got in there and is hiding." She laughed so hard she had to hold the box with both hands. It was a cake, her own, the first one that had come out properly, small and slightly collapsed on one side, and she had walked it up 8 flights without letting it tip. I ate it at my table while she sat opposite with her chin in both palms, watching me chew. And she looked happier than she would have looked eating it herself. Later that night, when she had gone down and I was alone with half of it left on the plate, I thought about the corridor at the sauna. No shaking, no sickness, a little bit of excitement, and then nothing at all. And I noticed that the strange, restless feeling I had been carrying since the man in black had gone away entirely and had been replaced by something quiet. If I told Xinjia and her daughter that Wei He was dead, I thought, they would probably be glad. 2 of Xiao Han's people were watching Deng Yu's building, and Deng Yu came to the window and looked directly at them and drew a finger across his own throat. 4 hours later, the radio traffic came in. There is only one of them. Why is he getting bigger? He is getting bigger. Our rounds are not stopping him. It is a monster. Run. Then a sound like something heavy hitting a wall, and then nothing. Inspector Chen called it in to a department nobody at his level gets to speak to, and every officer in the district was told to hold the perimeter and go no further. Leg raise level 2 arrived under 2 sandbags full of bricks. The effect was called Ape Waste, 80% added to jumping power, and, in small print, to hang time. I read the words hang time, and did not understand them until I tried it. I jumped from standing onto the roof of the water tank, 3 meters, no run up. That was the boring part. The interesting part was coming down, because I did not come down. Not on schedule. I hung there, at the top, for about 2 seconds. And in those 2 seconds I had time to turn over twice and pick where my feet were going. 2 seconds is a very long time. 2 seconds is enough to change your mind in midair. I spent the rest of that night going along the roof pipes like something between a free runner and an ape, and for once the panel had given me a toy instead of a weapon. The clinic was full of injured men again, and Brother He was holding court. Both gangs had put their best people in, he said. And then the Red Long expert used what Brother He insisted on calling a divine strike and turned into a monster. 3 meters. Waist like a barrel. Hot steam coming out of his nose in the cold. He took a man's head off with one hand, and the knives did not go in, and the bullets did not stop him, and he killed with his hands the fighter the Three Wolves had hired from the Dongchang Association. The Three Wolves boss died that night. The gang was finished by morning. The Red Long. He took all of Jiangbei. Is it true the Three Wolves had an unbeatable assassin? Somebody asked from the bench. Brother He snorted. That Dongcheng expert died yesterday. His body has already gone cold. I was working on his back at the time. I pressed a little harder, and he yelped and told me I had healing hands. Qin Xiao was in the clinic bathroom being sick, and she was doing it on purpose. She had heard somewhere that it comes out faster that way, and she had decided that was a plan, and she was down on the tiles with her fingers in her own throat. Even if it is only for Qin Mei, she said when she could talk, I can hold on. It is 100 times harder than getting up every morning to train, I said. She laughed at that. Actually laughed with her face wet. Meanwhile, Deng Yu took half the Three Wolves territory, which meant the slums, and he put a man called Mad Kang in charge of the North Point market. Mad Kang had run the trafficking under Wei He and had ambitions. Their standing order came down that week. Find the hidden assassin, watch Ju Chang Street. Blade technique level 1. Effect, shadow of the blade. When attacking with a weapon, the body merges into the flash of the blade and becomes untraceable. I tried it in front of my own mirror in the dark. 1 slow cut, and I watched the knife stay perfectly sharp and clear, while the man holding it smeared like a photograph taken at the wrong shutter speed. It does not make me stronger. It does not make the cut harder. It makes it impossible to know where the cut came from. The person who truly appreciates that effect is never me. It is always the man in front of me, in the last second he gets. That night, I also counted the strangers. 5. 3 static inside a 200-meter radius. 1 in a parked car, 1 in the noodle place across the road, 1 on the roof opposite. 2 more walking the street on a rotation of about 40 minutes. I learned all 5 faces and all 5 schedules, and I did not do anything about it because I wanted to know what they were waiting for. That was my mistake. That is the one I still think about, still think. They came into the clinic at 7 in the evening. Mad Kang's men, 4 of them, led by the one they call Brother Pan. Chinja had been paid that afternoon, 4,000 as an advance, because she wanted to buy her daughter a proper winter coat. They hit her across the face and knocked her down between the benches, and Brother Pan dropped a small folded packet on the floor in front of her. "Tell us where that man lives," he said, "and there is more where that came from." And behind the counter, Gao Changfu took off his reading glasses. "Has Jianghu really come to this?" he said. "Nothing left but cowards who can only hit women." Chen Qin laughed and stepped forward, and the old man put 2 fingers under his jaw, and Chen Qin stopped making any sound at all, not knocked out. Standing there, mouth open, no voice. The 2 big ones came together. He touched one under the ribs and the other low on the belly and told them, conversationally as he did it, that he was shaking the spleen and cutting the flow, and both of them went down on their knees to be sick on the clinic floor. Then he pinched each of them once at the shoulder and once at the side of the neck, and both of them lay down and slept. The 4th had a dagger. The old man took his shoulder out of its socket and stood him against the wall. His sleeve had torn at the elbow. He looked at it and sighed. "There is no getting away from being old," he said, and put his glasses back on and picked up his tea. While that was happening in the clinic, 2 other men were already in the basement. Chinmei had made a second cake, smaller than the first. She carried it down the outside stairs in both hands, saw the light on in her own room, and thought her mother had come home early. She opened the door. A hand closed around her throat from the side, and a cloth came over her face, and the box went out of her hands and hit the concrete upside down. The van was gone in under a minute. I was fully dressed and ready to go and kill Deng Yu when I found Qin Xia on the ground floor of our building. She was sitting against the wall with the crushed cake box in her hands, and she could not hold it still, and she could not get the words in the right order. Chin Mei. They took her. Wei He's people. And I understood, standing in that stairwell, that I had been reading the whole board wrong for a week. Those 5 men outside were not watching for me. They were watching to find out which door the mother and the daughter went through. I have described the feeling in that hallway to exactly one person since. It was like a gate somewhere at the bottom of my head that had been welded shut, came off its hinges, and everything behind it came up at once. I crouched down and made her look at me. "Sister Wang," I said, "I give you my word. Chin Mei comes back alive." Then I went out and took the man in the alley. He had been standing in the same doorway for 4 nights. I got him around the corner in about a second and a half, and I asked him 3 questions and he gave me the first 2. I took 3 fingers for the 3rd one. Then I used the knife. "You should not have touched her," I told him. "If there is a next life, stay off this road." He went in the bin behind the noodle shop, under the rubbish, and I put the whole alley through Scavenger's Eye twice on my hands and knees until the world stopped showing me white. I called the number I had taken off his phone from a booth 4 streets away. "Good evening," I said. "I need a kidney." The man who came to meet me had a briefcase and the manner of a regional sales manager. He explained that demand was extremely strong at present, and that police attention was making everyone nervous, so I should decide quickly. I told him my family had a slaughterhouse, and that he should not ask further questions. He liked that a great deal. I said I wanted to inspect the source personally. The place had a roller shutter and a dozen men behind it, and the moment it came down, I understood that they had never intended to sell me anything. "Look at this," one of them said. "A tender little one this time." "How much money did you bring?" said another. They were going to take the buyer apart along with the merchandise. It was, I suppose, efficient. I looked around that room and made sure I had every one of them. Then I put the knife in my hand and let Shadow of the Blade run. I disappeared and appeared, and a man's throat opened. I disappeared and appeared, and a man went down over a crate. There was no fighting. There was no exchange. There was only a room in which men were standing, and then the same room with everything in it changed. 20 seconds for the whole warehouse. Blade technique plus 90. I walked back to the shutter and pushed it up, and the light came in off the street, and the man with the briefcase was sitting on the ground against the wall with both hands over his head. "Now," I said, "can we talk?" He could not stop talking, so I gave him a rule. "From now on, I ask, you answer. 1 extra word and I take your tongue." He shut his mouth so fast his teeth clicked. He had his own severed index finger in his good hand, and he would not put it down. There was one thought in his head, and he told me later in a rush what it was. This polite-looking young man had gone into that room and taken apart 14 people in under half a minute. 14 people, he kept saying, not 14 chickens. They had been Mad Kang's action team, cleanup, good at fighting, and without hesitation about the rest of it. He led me down a street of bars and clubs with the neon going in the puddles, and into a place with spotlights and a DJ, and about 400 young people who had no idea what floor they were standing under. We went to the lift, and he used his staff card, and the panel lit for the 5th floor. Another man got in with us. "Fatty," he said, "somebody beat you up? Is your arm broken? Did Brother Kang find out what you did?" Then he turned to me. "This your guest? Why the mask? Ashamed of daylight?" And he reached for it. The fat man went white and screamed at him. "Will you shut your dog mouth?" The other one stared, muttered something, and got out first at the 5th floor. I did not touch him because there was a camera in that lift. That is the only reason I brought a guide at all. Walk in the front and Mad Kang is out a back door in 9 seconds, and I never find him again. The floor above the club was decorated like a legitimate clinic. Reception, soft chairs, salespeople talking a couple through the details of a procedure. You had to go through 2 turns in a changing room before it stopped pretending. He opened a wardrobe, felt around, and a false door came out of the back of it. Inside was a corridor with 4 armed men at the head of it, and rooms down both sides with iron doors and barred windows like a wing of a prison. Children behind the bars, boys and girls. Some of them looked up when we came past, and most did not. "Children are the main supply," the fat man explained quietly because I had asked. "Healthy, obedient, easy to keep. When the tissue types match, they go in." At the end, there was a room with a green light over the door. I looked through the glass. There was a girl on the table under anesthetic, already asleep, and she was not Chin Mei, and the doctors had stepped out to scrub. I sent him to find Mad Kang. There were 2 bodyguards on the office door who looked at us the way dogs look at a delivery. "Is Brother Kang in? I want to introduce a big client from Southeast Asia." "Brother Kang is in a meeting." So I said 4 sentences in Nanyang. Neither of them understood a word. Both of them straightened up, because a man who speaks a language you do not is either nobody or somebody, and the suit was good. Inside, Mad Kong was explaining his business philosophy to 5 of his own people, more entertainment venues. Zhongbei has no economy but excellent nightlife, and bring back all the girls who have run, because they are on the product anyway, and it is better for them. Then he heard the words Southeast Asia and lit up like a birthday because the trade down there is bigger than here, and he had been looking for a channel. The door shut behind us. He locked it himself. "Speak freely," he said, sitting back in his chair. "This office was built for it. You could fire a gun in here." He signaled to the man who spoke Nanyang to translate. I took the mask off. "Mad Kang," I said. "Do you know me?" He frowned. "Have we done business?" "I am here for someone. Where is Chin Mei? Tell me now, and I might leave you alive." He laughed. All 5 of them laughed and got up and made a ring around the reckless young man. And behind me, the fat man's legs went. "Who is Chin Mei?" Mad Kang said, wiping his eye. "Anybody?" Nobody knew. "Chin Xia's daughter." He stopped. One of his people leaned in and said 4 words next to his ear, and his pupils shrank, and his smile stayed exactly where it was, while his right hand started drifting toward the drawer. I went first. High kick into the temple of the short one on the right, then dance of lightning and the butterfly knife, and an office is a very small room. To them, I simply stopped being anywhere. That is what the fat man said afterward. There was a line of afterimage with a cold edge in it, and there was screaming, and there was nothing to shoot at. Mad Kang got the gun out of the drawer. He got it up in both hands. He turned twice looking for a target and could not find one. And by the time he made himself pull the trigger, 4 of his people were already down. 3 shots into the wall, 1 into his own man's thigh. Then I put the knife through his hand and into the desk. 6 of them in a few seconds. Him pinned to his own furniture. And the fat man face down on the carpet with his arms over his head, sobbing quietly, having survived an entire magazine fired at close range by a man too frightened to aim. I pulled the blade out. I twisted off one of his fingers. I lifted the knife again. And Mad Kang broke completely. Wait, I will talk. I will tell you anything. I want to note something for the record." The fat man held out until he lost a finger. Brother Kang, whose entire reputation was cruelty, folded before I got to the second one. "She was here," he said. "His men took her, but she had not been kept at the market. Brother Pan had driven her out to Dung Yu, at a warehouse near the port. Dung Yu had set it up as bait. Take the girl, put the word out, and wait for the assassin to walk in. We were only trying," he said. "If you did not come, we lost nothing. Chinsha ran out of a house years ago, and the girl, well," he swallowed. "Dung Yu had orders from the boss. A batch of girls under 12, delivered to a secure site. We were short. She filled a space. I asked about the guard. There used to be Red Long experts with Dung Yu, he said, and there are not now. The ones who killed the 3 wolves boss came from headquarters, took injuries that night, and left immediately after. I asked when the delivery was. A few more days. That was the plan. Then he started negotiating. Money. Lots of money. He would testify. We would bring Dung Yu down together, the 2 of us. And from the floor, a small polite voice. "Brother Kang," said the fat man, raising one hand, "I am sorry. I have already applied to be a witness for the prosecution, and I am prepared to atone. I gave the fat man a job. Guard him. If he escapes, you pay for it." He picked a dagger up off the carpet and held it against Mad Kang's neck with both hands. "Please do not move," he said. "My hands are shaking. I am afraid I will hit something." I took the revolver. 4 rounds left. 2 bodyguards were pressed against the outside of the door listening, and when I opened it, they nearly fell in. I put their heads together and laid them down. 4 gunmen at the far end of the corridor came up out of their chairs. 4 shots. Marksmanship plus 40. I looked at the results on the way past and was annoyed because only 2 were centered and the other 2 were off, and I had switched weapons and the balance was different and I had not adjusted. That is the sentence I would like you to notice. 4 men in under 2 seconds, and my complaint was about grouping. I kicked in the door of the operating room. 2 doctors in green were pulling on gloves. "The patient has changed," I said. "Bring the anesthetic and come with me." A few minutes later, Mad Kang was on that table. Local anesthetic, awake, tape across his mouth, being prepared for a heart transplant he had personally arranged for someone else. I stood in the doorway and made a phone call. "Uncle Chen, it is me, An Chin. And Chin, it is 1 in the morning. I have found an underground market for human organs. There has just been a shooting here, and there are a lot of trafficked children being held. Yes, as fast as you can. The address is." You will notice that this is the 2nd time I have called that man to come and collect what I made. He has never once asked me how I keep finding them. I told the fat man what to say when the police arrived. He dispute, connected to Dong Yu. He repeated it back to me twice, carefully, like a student. 20 minutes later, I walked out through the false door with my mask on and a bag over my shoulder, past the reception with the soft chairs, and pressed the button for the lift. While I waited, I ran the whole thing back to check for anything left behind. The recordings from the office were already destroyed. The doors opened and 6 men in jackets came out in a knot, in a very good mood. "That job went smoothly. Brother Jun is generous. Chen Chin, you animals, the 3 of you did well tonight." The bearded one at the front was loudest. I turned around. "Brother Pan," he looked back and started to open his mouth. 10 rounds with a suppressor into an empty lift lobby, and then the doors closed and the lift went down with me in it. Outside, the sirens were already coming up the road. I put my hands in my pockets and walked out of a nightclub full of people who had felt nothing all evening, past 3 officers running the other way, into the crowd that was already gathering, because a crowd always is. 2 streets later, I let my breath out and looked at the lights. Blade technique plus 5, blade technique plus 90, Sanda plus 10, blade technique plus 25, marksmanship plus 40, marksmanship plus 60. It was like reading the score summary of a game I had been playing all night in a city that thought it was asleep. The killing intent had gone out of me a little. The rest of it had not, because I had not got her back yet. I took 20,000 in cash out of an ATM on the corner, the daily maximum, put it in the bag with the guns, and flagged a taxi. "Jishan?" The driver shook his head before I finished. Too late, too far, no. He looked at me carefully while he said it, and I could see him doing the arithmetic every driver in that city had been doing for a month, because the television had been running a story about a taxi driver who took a fare to a quiet place and did not come back. Handsome young man, polite, clean shirt. You can know a face, he was thinking, but not a heart. I gave him 400 yuan. His whole personality changed. "Well, you are very polite about it. All right, helping others is the source of happiness." I sat in the back for 40 minutes with a bag of firearms between my feet, and the source of happiness drove me to the mountain. Brother Long was closing up the gun shop under the Dongcheng shooting range when I came in. "You, kid." He looked past me for somebody. "Coming this late, Zhao Han not with you?" 5 magazines and 7.62, I said, and 50 rounds. He went to check the stock, and then his phone rang, and he took it into the back room, and I was left alone with the shelves. I did the shopping in my head. No machine guns and no launchers, on principle. Rifles start at 10,000 and cannot be carried through a city, and anyone who walks down a street with one has stopped being a gangster and become a bandit. Handguns, all much the same as the one I already had. Then I got to the clothing rack and the combat suit, which was the actual reason I had crossed the city at midnight. Xiao Han had told me the club version was a downgrade with mediocre stopping power. But if I was going into a room where 40 men had guns, something is better than nothing, and with my physique, anything that did not hit my head or my throat was going to be a bruise. Brother Long came out and found me looking at it. "You want a vest?" Then, thoughtfully, "Actually, I have a set in the back that has been sitting a long time. Your build might suit it. I could be flexible on the price." The storeroom had 1 mannequin in it. The suit was completely black and did not reflect anything. Up close, the fabric had a texture like snake scale. There was armor across the chest, carried on a frame like an exoskeleton. Newest military fabric, he said, and he was enjoying himself. Cut resistant, fire resistant, insect proof, and in the dark it defeats infrared imaging. High strength ballistic plate on the chest and back. Your only weak points are the armpits and the lower belly. The helmet takes blast pressure and crushing. The lenses are resin, high transparency, impact rated. I heard about half of it. I was looking at the mask. It was not a large helmet. It sat close to the skull and it was shaped like one, and when the goggles came down, it covered the entire face, and what was left was a dark, ugly ghost of a thing. How much? 25,000. I honestly could not tell whether that was cheap or robbery. Once in a lifetime, Brother Long said. That is the suit alone. Sighting systems, radios, optics, we do not sell here. I did not need any of that. I needed my chest and my face. I put it on to check, and threw 2 jabs and then a round kick that cracked, and my mobility was not affected at all. Behind me, Brother Long's pupils shrank, and his customer service improved dramatically. Brother Wei, there is a full-length mirror over there. Go and have a look at yourself. I went and had a look at myself. In that outfit, I looked like something from a film about the future, and also like old armor, the kind where you cannot see the eyes and the face is nothing but a shape. I paid with 20,000 in cash, and then I put 6 pistols on the counter. He went very quiet. He took each one apart, checked it, and quoted me 10,300 for the lot. Suit, mask, magazines, and ammunition came to nearly 28,000. When it was over, I had a little more than 2,000 yuan left, and everything I owned that mattered was in a bag. Then I looked at the panel, and I hesitated. Marksmanship level 1, 160 out of 250, 90 experience from Great Master, and I did not have the money. And Brother Long, who by now would have sold me his own shoes, said the most useful sentence of that entire night. Brother Wei, if you want to practice, this is a good time. The range runs a discount in off-peak hours. There is a discount for shooting at 3 in the morning. I had never in my life been so pleased with capitalism. The range was empty except for 1 man on duty and no instructor. I put on the glasses and the ear protection, took a training pistol, and looked down at a moving target running on a rail. Let us begin. Half an hour of it. Rolling, dropping, coming up at angles, firing from positions no one is taught, because ghost shooting does not care about the stance you were taught. 4 sets of moving targets. Congratulations. Great Master, Marksmanship Level 2. Enhancement reward received. Skill effect. Eagle eye vision. While concentrating, the user imitates the eye of an eagle, continuously improving viewing distance, field of vision, and light sensitivity. I looked at that description in an empty range at dawn. Blade technique gives me an effect that hides my presence. Marksmanship gives me the eyes of a sniper. Are they trying to make me a killer? I asked a machine only I could see. Outside, the sky was going gray and a bus was coming up the hill to collect the last of the gamblers. I took the old card out of my inside pocket and held it in both hands. The egg, the 6-pointed star, the date on the back in faded pen. I hope you really will protect Chinmei and me, I said to it. I hope we both come back. Then I put it away and got on the bus. I spent the next day on the roof of a 73-story building in Lingang, watching a warehouse 2 kilometers away. Eagle eye vision brought it to me like I was standing at the fence. 3 floors, open containers stacked around it, forklifts, men walking a pattern that was much too regular for a freight company. Past it, the docks, the cranes going up and down, and a container ship coming in with an orange sunset lying flat on the water behind it. So, they had not shipped yet. The building plans I had collected that morning from the Port Planning Bureau, where the clerk was extremely helpful to a polite young man doing a thesis. The rest was counting. From 8 in the morning, 3 groups went in and none came out. Add the standing guard and you get at least 150 men in there. Deng Yu had pulled in everyone he had. My eyes were dry and hot. Half an hour of eagle eye is expensive, and it comes out of the same account as everything else. So I put it away and did the last thing on my list for the day, on the roof of a 73-story building, with the whole city going gold underneath me. Back bridges, 204, 205, 206. Great Master. Back bridge level 2. Enhancement reward. 9 free attribute points. I did not spend them either, not out of discipline this time, out of superstition. I had been saving points before I fought a champion once, to find out what I was actually worth, and I had liked the answer. I wanted to know what I was worth going into that warehouse. Inside the warehouse that evening, 4 freight trucks came through the container maze in low gear, trying and failing to be quiet. Men jumped down out of the backs of them, carrying submachine guns and light machine guns, and it was immediately obvious that no freight company escorts a load like that. Deng Yu watched from the 3rd floor window. Headquarters finally sent more people, he said, but those 2 protectors are not among them. Why bring a hammer to crack a nut? Said a voice behind him. The 2 of us are enough. A young man in a black bodysuit was holding a sword in both hands and moving it slowly through the air, and even at that speed, the blade made a noise. On the sofa, a man built like a bodybuilder had his legs crossed and a glass of red wine in his hand. "I am looking forward to this hidden assassin of the three wolves," he said. "I hope he does not disappoint me too badly." They were both on holiday as far as they were concerned. They were not Deng Yu's men. They had been sent by head office as supervisors, and their job was the cargo, the girls, and the thing in the glass box in the middle of the room. Deng Yu had been living in that office for 2 days, partly because the delivery mattered. Mostly because he had realized that if his personal enemy became a threat to an organization mission, he could spend the organization's resources solving his own problem in the open with permission. His man Minjun came in and told him the police had sealed his trading company. Deng Yu was not concerned. All the dirt sat on subordinates and the books were kept by professionals, and we live in a society of laws where a man cannot be convicted on the word of a witness who is himself a criminal. "A shame Mad Kang died so quickly," he said. "That would have been simpler." Then he checked his monitors, saw his best shooters in position on every angle of every floor, and relaxed. As long as the firepower is heavy enough, he thought, nobody is bulletproof. And then he looked at the tank in the middle of his office and said to himself that the test subject really was starting to look more and more like a monster. On the roof in Lingang, the rain turned to sleet. I stood on the parapet wall and looked at the port for a while. Then I got down, took off my coat, and put on the suit. 7 magazines into the chest and waist pouches. Butterfly knife into the tactical belt. Mask down. I checked myself in the black glass of the stairwell door, and there was nothing there. No shape, no face, nothing but 2 points behind the goggles where the light caught. Then I spread the blueprint out under the water tower, where the rain could not get at it, and put my finger on the red circle. Power distribution room. 3 men were smoking by the east gate, complaining about the weather. So cold and raining. Forecast says snow tonight. Nothing ever happens on a snow night. Who knows what happens? With this supernatural business, you have to be more careful, not less. Then everything went dark. The whole compound. All at once. And from every direction, near and far, men started shouting the same question at each other. Their headsets crackled. "There has been an attack on the distribution room by the east gate." And then the voice stopped in the middle of a word. The 3 of them went with their weapons up, and found 2 men on the ground, and nobody else. And a room with the door hanging open, and nothing inside but silence. One of them found a torch. He kicked the door of the distribution room wide and swept it and found nothing. Behind them, more footsteps. Support arriving. They relaxed slightly. Then one of them noticed the east door a few meters away, swinging in the wind, letting the rain in, and looked down and saw the 3rd member of his group lying half in and half out of it. The body was why the door would not close. "All units, Group E10 is down, all 3. The target is inside." That was as far as he got. 3 shots from somewhere out in the dark and the rain, through the gap in the door, and the 3 of them went over backwards, one after another. I was lying flat on wet concrete about 30 meters out with my chest in a puddle, and the whole world was in that gap, and every time a man came within a meter of it, Eagle Eye put him in the middle of my sight and ghost shooting put the round in his forehead. Half a minute of that. Then the footsteps stopped coming because somebody with sense had worked out what was happening. I got up like something coming out of a drain and went through the gap in the door. Inside, there were torch beams swinging and voices trying to organize. "Watch out, I see him, right there." They fired at where I had been. I went along the floor and into the dark, and then their torches were on the ceiling, and their voices were not organizing anymore. "Kill the torches! Kill the torches now!" "His shooting is a ghost." They killed the torches. It did not help. In a completely black warehouse, the rounds kept arriving anyway, 1 man at a time, and it did not matter whether they were behind a container or wearing a vest, and after a while it stopped sounding like a firefight and started sounding like something else. Marksmanship plus 45. I crushed a headset under my heel and looked up at the fire door at the far end. Then I heard the boots on the stairs, a lot of them, and I changed magazines and took out the knife and stood beside the door in the dark like a man waiting for a bus. The first one through opened it into a blade. Then I put him back through the doorway ahead of me and went in behind him, and the ones following got about a second to understand that the shape coming down the stairwell was not their colleague. Some of them fell, some of them fired and hit each other. In a concrete stairwell with no light and 40 men in it, being organized is worse than being alone. And I was alone. Under 2 minutes. Then nobody came, because somebody upstairs had made the correct decision at last, and stopped feeding them in. 2nd floor. I pushed the fire door and stepped through, and the searchlights came on. They had set up on top of the containers with machine guns, and the entire floor lit white, and the first burst took the wall apart where my head had been. But I had spent an afternoon on a roof 2 kilometers away, memorizing that room, and I was already rolling for the corner. They started shouting at each other about how the rat would not come out. So I threw a fire extinguisher into the middle of the floor and put a round through it. The room filled with white powder, and while they were still finding their triggers, I put 4 rounds into the searchlights and gave the dark back to myself. Then I went up the side of a container like an ape, walked along the top of it, and came down behind the machine gunner lying prone at the end. Blade technique, level 2. Great master. Enhancement reward. Skill effect. Blade storm. I did not even open the description. There was no time and there was no need, because at that moment, somewhere in the building, there was a girl who had made me a cake, and everything else could wait. The 3rd floor was a corridor with the lights on. I could hear breathing behind the doors on both sides. I put 2 submachine guns through those doors from the hip, 1 in each hand, and then walked down the middle of the corridor firing into the rooms. And by the end of it, I had taken out every camera and every light and most of the doors. Then I threw both guns away because I had never used them before, and half the bursts had gone wide and it was embarrassing. 4 survivors came out at me shouting. I met them with my hands because it was the most respectful thing left to do. Wrist, so their rounds went into their friends. Knee. Neck against the wall. A kick across the liver. Then I went to find the boss. Deng Yu heard the shooting stop. That was the worst part for him, he told me with his eyes. Not the noise. The silence and then footsteps coming along a corridor at a walking pace. The door came off its lock and a body came through it, and his 2 bodyguards emptied their weapons into it in about 2 seconds. When the smoke cleared, it was one of their own men. "You idiots!" Deng Yu screamed. "Aim first." Then he stopped because a man in a black suit and a mask like a skull had walked out of the dark corridor into the light of his office. "Do not do anything reckless," he said very fast. "These 2 beside me are the top experts of our gang. Their killing skills are not inferior to yours." My pupils shrank. I looked at the young man with the sword and the one built like a competition bodybuilder, and I thought, so these are the red long experts that blades and bullets do not touch, and my whole body set itself. Deng Yu saw me tense and got confident. "There have been misunderstandings between us," he said. "We can sit down. There is nothing that cannot be settled by discussion." The bodybuilder waved him quiet without looking at him. "We can discuss your negotiations later." Then to me, "You look like you are in good condition. Do you have the guts to test your fists against mine?" I looked at him. I looked at the other one with the sword. I put the pistol and the knife away and raised my hands into a boxing guard. "Not bad," he said, and his eyes changed. "Now I will show you what power beyond the ordinary limit means." He came off his back foot with a straight right, a sandbag on the end of an arm, aimed at the strip of neck under my mask. I stepped in and threw the same punch back at him. 2 fists met in the middle of a room. There was a crack and then a scream, and Deng Yu had time for exactly 1 moment of hope before he understood. The bodybuilder's hand had come apart, not broken. Come apart, and the arm above it twisted and folded like something wrung out. And he went over backwards, holding what was left of it, and made a noise I would rather not describe. That is iron fist at 30 physique, 60 in the hands. The young man with the sword went white and cut at my back without a word. The blade took me diagonally from shoulder to hip and split me in 2, and both halves came apart like smoke, because Shadow of the Blade had already put me somewhere else. He got his sword up on instinct. Sparks came off it where the butterfly knife met it, and his grip loosened, and the black shape in front of him vanished again. Then a cold line arrived at his neck. He took 2 steps backward with his mouth open, and then his head went over onto his shoulder, and he sat down. I flicked the knife clean and stood there, honestly astonished. Those were the top experts, the ones blades and bullets do not touch, 1 punch and 1 cut. The screaming from the floor reminded me the other one was still alive, so I kicked his head hard enough to end it, because whatever else I am, I do not leave a man in that state. The office went silent. Deng Yu and his 3 remaining people stood there with their knees visibly going. "You," he said, "do not come any closer. I still have hostages," he said. "You want to know where that little girl is? You let me walk." I did not answer him. I turned to the other 3. "Whoever brings me the girls who are locked up, I let him live." They looked at each other for less than a second. Then all 3 hands went up. Me, me, me! And they ran for the side door, falling over each other, having completely forgotten the man they had worked for. "You ungrateful animals," Deng Yu said. And then he laughed. "You think this is the end of it?" The glass tank in the middle of the office started to beep. Red light came up through the fluid, and the fluid started to boil with bubbles. He had kept the release control in his own hand the entire time. He had planned for this exact evening, and he had decided that if he went, everything went. "Since you are not leaving me a way out," he said, "then we all die together." The thing in the tank opened its eyes, it roared underwater, and the sound came through the glass, and the glass came apart, and 40 liters of fluid went across the floor, and 5 steel restraints snapped like pencils. It stood up. Over 2 meters. Skin dark red and shining. Muscle stacked in the wrong places, in bundles. like cable laid by somebody who did not care what it looked like. Its eyes were entirely red and they rolled. Have you heard how the Three Wolves boss had his head taken off inside his own headquarters? Deng Yu said from behind his desk, with his voice climbing. This subject was classified a failure, unstable. And he is still stronger than every protector we have, because he is a human weapon the organization has spent decades making. Then he pointed at me. Hey, do you still know me? That one is an enemy of the Red Long He. Deal with him. The thing looked down at him, slowly, as if it were trying to place a face. Deng Yu's chin lifted with pleasure. Then a hand came down and took his whole head in it and picked him up off the floor like a chick. What are you doing? I said the one in black, not me. I will not describe the next part. I will tell you the result, which is that Deng Yu stopped talking and did not start again. And by the time it dropped him, the ulcers on its arms had closed and the tendons under its skin were moving like something turning over in its sleep. It fed. That is what it was doing. And it healed while it did it. Is this even a person anymore? I thought. No. This is what the old men were talking about in that courtyard. I did not move because I could hear voices coming, which meant the children were being brought out, and the sensible play was to stay still. It had killed the man who caged it. Maybe it would leave. It drank and threw the body down and turned its head and looked at me. Then it licked its lips. I went sideways off my back foot and a crater appeared in the floor where I had been standing. Spiderwebbed out 2 meters in every direction, boards up, concrete showing through. I put 3 rounds in on the way past. Forehead, throat, heart, all 3 home. It picked the bullets out of itself with its fingers and the holes closed while I watched. Then it came at me like a truck. There is nothing clever to say about the next 30 seconds. I rolled and I jumped and craters kept appearing where I had been. And I understood with total clarity that one clean hit ends me at 30. Physique, armor, or not. But it was big, and I was not. And agility 21 against that much mass meant I was fractionally faster. So I ran up a wall, kicked off it, and as I went over the top of it, I put 2 rounds down into its eyes. Eye muscle is still eye. It screamed properly for the first time. I landed and let out a breath. That is when the side door opened and a line of children came out with Minjun and the 2 bodyguards herding them, and I saw a face in the middle of the group that I had last seen carrying a cake down a stairwell. Look out! Get back! Chin Mei heard my voice through the mask, and her face did something confused and hopeful at the same time. The blinded thing heard a crowd. It went for them. It got Minjun first, by the hair, and it did not let go, and I shouted at the bodyguards to take the children and get out, and knew as I said it that they would not make it. So I emptied the magazine into its back. Every round, as fast as I could pull. It let go of what it was holding and came for me instead, and I have never been so glad to be hated. I went out of the office backwards firing, and it came after me, and it wore the door frame like a coat, and the iron staircase folded flat under it as it came down into the dark second floor. I was waiting under the stairs. The butterfly knife went into its heart as it landed. Half a centimeter, and then it stopped, as if I had stabbed a block of rubber. It got both arms around me, and I was already gone. And then we were both standing in the dark, 12 meters apart. And I did the arithmetic honestly. The eyes had already healed over with new tissue. Bullets do nothing except to soft points that will not be soft twice. The knife will not go in. My hands and feet against that are a joke. I could go. That was a real option, right there. And it was the correct one. And I did not want to. I want to be honest about it, because I have thought about that decision a great deal since. It was not courage, and it was not the girl. She was already out. It was that I had spent a year finding out what I was, and here was the only thing in the world that could give me a straight answer, and I could not walk away from the exam. The red in my eyes came up like a light behind glass, and my blood went hot. I opened the panel and finally read the thing I had been given upstairs. Bladestorm. The wielder attacks with a bladed weapon at extreme power and speed, producing a cutting force several times sharper than normal. Warning. Consumes a large amount of stamina and spirit. Use with caution. It came at me, and this time I did not move away. I dropped my shoulder, pushed off the floor, and went in under it. Bladestorm, activate. Something hot came up out of my chest and ran down my arm into the blade, and the cut left a dark red line hanging in the cold air behind it. It sensed something and put its hand out to catch the knife. Its hand is the strongest thing on it. Bullets do not mark it. Nothing does. The blade went through the hand and out the other side, and the whole thing, 5 fingers in all, came off at the wrist and hit the floor. It screamed again. Then it swung with the other arm and put a shipping container in on itself, and I was already gone sideways, breathing hard, because that single cut had taken something like half of everything I had, and the stump was already closing. I stood there in the dark and started laughing behind the mask. Fine. If one is not enough, I will use more. First the hands so you have nothing to hit with. Then the throat so you stop making that noise. And if that is still not enough, I will keep going until there is nothing left to be a monster with. Let us find out whether you are really a demon. Out over the black water, a helicopter came in low with its light on. There were 2 men in the back in combat gear and black masks, and the younger one had taken out a case with a syringe and 5 vials of pale blue liquid in it. He put the needle into the side of his own neck. The whites of his eyes filled with vessels, and a faint blue came up in his pupils. "Han," said the older one, "this is not your first job. Still nervous?" "Brother Xiao, intelligence says these red-long subjects are practically indestructible. This is going to be a hard fight." Brother Xiao laughed and patted the 2 odd-looking weapons on his belt. "Tranquilizer. 1 shot puts down a 10-ton elephant in 3 seconds. And this one is 200,000 volts. Use these 2 properly and you can finish anything below rank C without touching it." The pilot chipped in that he had machine guns and rockets, so nobody needed to be brave. "The subject is roughly 20 times the strength of an ordinary man," Brother Xiao said. "Recovery is the impressive part, but there is no awakened ability. Without one, it is a brainless lump with too many weaknesses. That is why headquarters rated the job D and sent the 2 of us. The dangerous thing tonight is the gangsters. In a crowd, weapons do not check who they hit." They dropped from 10 meters onto concrete, and it did not trouble them. They pushed the east door open with their weapons up, ready for the fight. The floor inside was covered in men who had been dead for some time. Not a few. Everywhere, in every direction. And when they came around the corner into the main hall, it opened out into something they both stopped walking for. Most of them had been shot once in the center of the forehead. Somebody got here first, they thought. Somebody has already taken the objective. Then 3 men came out of the emergency stairwell, filthy and shaking, and saw the black uniforms and nearly cried with relief. "Are you here to help us? There are monsters, 2 monsters, upstairs, fighting. Even Brother Jun is dead. We live by lying still and pretending." Brother Xiao nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "Is there anything else you want to say?" There was not. He put his dagger away afterward and told Ah Ren that the situation had changed and to watch his hand signals. Then they went up the stairs, and the stairs were the part that stayed with them. The stairwell was full, and every one of them had been killed a slightly different way, and all of it ran in one continuous line, as if the man who did it had been walking upstairs the whole time and had never once stopped. The second floor had no lights and smelled like a slaughter yard. They stood at the top with their weapons up and heard nothing at all except one wet, rhythmic sound coming from the far end. 15 meters away, a black shape was kneeling on a mound of something and driving a bent, ruined butterfly knife down into it. Again, and again, and again, breathing like an animal between strikes. When their eyes adjusted, Ah Ren saw what the mound was, arms and legs off, head off, sitting 2 meters away, looking at nothing. He knew that head. It was in the mission file. It was the objective. A creature described in his briefing as immune to blades and bullets had been taken apart alive with a short knife by somebody who was still going. So what, thought Ah Ren, is the thing that killed it? The black shape stopped and stood up and turned around. The mask had no face on it. Behind the lenses, there were 2 red points. Brother Xiao, who had 15 years in and had been in rooms he still does not talk about, felt his own breathing go heavy and understood that the density of killing intent in that warehouse was not something that appears anywhere in a D-rank job. "Do not move," Ah Ren said, and got his weapon up. Brother Xiao put a hand across in front of him, fast. "We are from the Special Investigation Team," he said, loudly and clearly. "We are here only to carry out a mission. We have no ill intent toward you." The black shape said nothing at all. I could hear him. I want to be clear about that. I could hear every word, and I could not find the part of myself that answers. There was a red fog over everything, and in the fog every person in the world had turned into a shape that had to be cut down. And I remember thinking, with total calm, that I would have to start with the 2 by the stairs and then go and find the rest. And then a small voice came out of the dark. "Elder brother." They both turned. There was a girl standing there in a filthy dress, and her eyes were bright, and there was a faint white light coming off her, thin as mist, like moonrise in a room with no windows. She walked straight past 2 armed men toward the monster. "Is that healing ability?" Ah Ren whispered. "Brother, is that you?" she said. "Wake up. It is me. It is Chin Mei." And the red went out of the world. It was like coming out of a dream you were sure was happening. In the dream, everything alive had teeth, and I had to keep swinging until there was nothing left. And then somebody said my name, and the whole thing came apart like fog. I looked down. There was a small hand holding 2 of my fingers. Her eyes were frightened. She was frightened of me specifically, and she was still standing there holding on. I dropped the knife, which had been ruined for some time, and my face unclenched behind the mask, and I heard myself let a breath out. She felt it happen. She looked up and smiled, with the dimples, and would not let go of my hand. And then I was afraid, properly afraid, for the first time that night. Because I had killed the thing, and then kept going. Because I had used potential activation to top myself back up, so I could keep going. And the only reason I stopped was that the knife broke and Bladestorm had nothing left to run through. If it had held together, I would still have been there when the sun came up. I turned my head and looked at the two men by the stairs. Brother Xiao held up an identification card very slowly, at arm's length. Special Investigation Team, under the Security Department. We are here to take that subject. Whatever else happened here with the Red Long, he is not our business. Do as you like with it. You want this thing? He nodded. I could not think of a single reason to fight the government at 2 in the morning, so I stepped back. They did not say another word. One of them carried the body out over his shoulder, and the other collected the parts, and they went past me and down the stairs and out. Only outside, in the rain, did the two of them let their shoulders down. He was reasonable, Ah Ren said, still shaking. Not like the other things, some rich family's young master, out hunting for experience. His suit was expensive, Brother Xiao said, thinking it through. And the girl has a healing ability, which is rare. Neither of them is common stock. He frowned. But I have never heard of a Wen family, not one. Then he looked at the shoulder he was carrying and stopped walking. At the torn base of the neck, small threads of new tissue had started to grow, moving very slowly, reaching for something that was no longer there. The body was still alive. If it had been taken back to a laboratory quickly enough, it could have been put together again. Brother Xiu's mouth went dry. The intelligence on this job was wrong, not slightly. And that meant the assessment of the difficulty was wrong, and the estimate of that man's strength had to go up by at least a full class. They tied the load, and the helicopter took it, and they went back over the water toward the lights of the city. The rotors had barely cleared the compound when a gray sedan came up the access road, fast enough to throw sparks off the curb. Xiaohan got out of it like a bear coming out of a shed, and opened his coat, and there were 2 demolition charges taped around his waist, and a grenade in each hand. Chen Feng came around the car trying to talk him out of it, and was ignored. He had been hiding in the countryside for a week on my instructions. Then Brother Long from the Dongcheng shop had called him, and mentioned that a young man had come to the range alone at midnight, and bought ammunition and a combat suit. Xiaohan worked that out in about 4 seconds. Then he called me, and I gave him a polite non-answer, and that settled it. So he went and found out where Deng Yu was, and drove there with everything he owned strapped to him, because the plan was to walk in the front and pull every gun in the building onto himself, so that I could get the girl out the back. The whole thing started because of him. That is what he told Chen Feng in the car. How could he sit in a village while somebody else fixed it? He came through the main door roaring, "Red Long, every one of you, out here. Tonight we find out who buries who." And what he found was a man in a black combat suit directing 2 frightened bodyguards to sweep the floor and build a fire out of packing cardboard and broken pallets so that a group of small girls in thin clothes would not freeze while they waited. "Han," I said without turning around. "You came." He stood in the doorway with a grenade in each hand. "What?" he said. "What is this? Are you running a scout camp? I have a job for you. Look after these children and wait for the police." His mouth opened and did not close for a while. "You already finished? Where is the Red Long He? Where is Deng Yu?" "If you are curious," I said, "go upstairs and have a look." He was up there about 4 minutes. He came down gray, sat on the bottom step, and put his head between his knees. Then he stood up, straightened his coat, and turned to Chen Feng with the air of a man taking charge of a situation. "Feng, quickly, before the police get here, grab a couple of those submachine guns and put them in the car." "Brother?" "They are expensive," said Xiaohan. "We have had a very costly month. We need to recover something." An hour later, I was on a rooftop in Lingang with the sirens going below us. I was in a jacket and tracksuit trousers again, ordinary, the way I had walked out of my building. The bag was heavy on my shoulder. Down at the port, there were red and blue lights crawling all over a warehouse, and it already felt like a film I had seen rather than a thing I had done. Chin Mei was next to me on the parapet with her legs hanging over. "Brother Wei Hao, look, it is snowing." I looked up. It was. The first of the winter, coming down between the towers in big, slow flakes, catching the light off every neon sign it passed, so that the whole gap between the buildings was full of small, bright things falling. For a second, the city stopped being what it was. "I used to be really afraid of snow days," she said. Her face was pink with cold. "I could only stay inside and wait for the sun to come back." She was quiet for a moment. "But now, I have my mum, and you, and Sister May, and I think I'm not afraid anymore." I put my hand on her head. I was thinking about the first time I ever hit anybody. A bus stop, a drunk, a garbage sack bigger than the girl carrying it. I had done that for a stranger and gone home with 20 experience points and a split knuckle. And tonight I had walked into a building with 150 men in it for the same girl, and I had come out the other side. I have no defense to offer, and I did not want one. I did not feel sick, and I did not feel sorry. What I felt, standing up there in the snow, was relief. Not because it was over, because I finally understood what all of it had been for. Every morning on a cold floor, every push-up I could not do, and then could. Every number I raised while my mother slept on a folding bed in a cancer ward. It was not for the panel, and it was not to be the strongest man in a shopping mall gym. There are people in the world who need you, and if you are strong enough, you get to keep them. That is all it is. That is the whole thing. I remembered how she had called me in the dark on the second floor when I could not find my own name. I took a breath. Chinmay. From now on, you can call me brother. She stopped. She looked at me sideways to check I meant it. And then, immediately, as if she had been waiting for permission for weeks and was annoyed that it had taken me this long, she said it. Elder brother. It went out over the rooftops like a small silver bell. In the dark, those amber eyes were the brightest things in that entire city. And the snow was coming down heavier now, melting on her hair and on my shoulders. And neither of us moved for a while. Then I picked up the bag and took her hand. Come on, I said. Let us go home. Across the city, in a warm apartment high above the snow, a woman in a thin slip stood at the window with her arms folded. Chu Yue had felt it. Not seen. Felt through whatever thread had been strung between them since a library table. The man from her divination had just come through something. He had changed. There was more of him than there had been that afternoon, and it was not organized yet, and it was enormous. Like a lion, she thought, like a lion let out of a cage, finally showing the claws it had been sitting on. Well, she said to the glass, now we are getting somewhere. The next morning, I got up late and drew the curtains on a white city. I skipped the run, snow, and a hard night, and a body that needed to be allowed to repay itself. But I did 100 weighted squats with 3 sacks of rice on my shoulder, and 100 one-arm push-ups on the knuckles, and then I stood by the window and worked the breathing for an hour. The heat in my abdomen was clearer than it had been. Still would not go where I put it. This one cannot be rushed. Then I sat down and read the numbers. Boxing level 2, Sanda level 2, Jiu-Jitsu level 1, 11 from Great Master, Muay Thai level 1, Marksmanship level 2, Blade Technique level 2, and the last of those had come with 100 points in one night. And then I sat there and worked out the thing that mattered. Bladestorm calls what it uses saber energy. It appears when the body and the mind lock together, and the panel says it goes into a blade. But there is no reason a thing like that should only live on steel. It should go anywhere, into a fist, into a shin, into the whole body at once. Which is exactly what Chin Chin had been describing in a courtyard with a boiling kettle in his hands. They are the same thing. One of them is a game mechanic, and one of them is a 100-year-old tradition, and they are the same thing. And the old man had told me it takes 10 years, and I now had a very good reason to find out if he was wrong. There was a second number too, and it was less pleasant. At Physique 30 and Spirit 33, one use of Bladestorm cost a third of everything I had. 3 in one fight, maximum. And after the third one, my mind would be so empty that the red would come back and I would not be able to see the difference between an enemy and a person. So, breathing exercises and something else. I could hear Chu Yue's voice at the university gate. If any of you discovers you have that ability, develop it. Maybe I really do need to learn how to meditate. I put the television on while I dried my hair. Police raided a concealed warehouse at Dongdu Port at approximately 10 last night, successfully breaking a major human trafficking case. A fierce exchange of fire took place. Several criminals were killed. 3 faces went past on the screen, with blurring over them, and I recognized all of them. Xiaohan, Chen Feng, Inspector Wei Yu, standing at the back with his hands behind him, looking at the camera the way he looks at everything. Then the doorbell went. Chin Mei was on the landing, holding a bowl in both hands with steam coming off it. Brother, Mama and I made sweet soup. You should have some. She explained it very carefully while I took it off her, because she had clearly rehearsed. Red bean and taro and small glutinous rice balls, and it is delicious. I ate it at the table. She sat opposite with her elbows on the wood, watching, opening and closing her mouth. What? I said. Say it. Elder brother. She looked at her hands. After breakfast, could we go out and have a snowball fight? I have not done it in a long time. We will get Sister May too, I said. Snowball fight and a snowman. She clapped, which is a thing she does with her whole body. I sat there with a warm bowl and thought that a day like this does not come often, and that I was going to give myself one, for the first time in a year. In a courtyard house on the other side of Dongdu, an old man in a fur-collared coat was drinking tea in a room with snow in the doorway and 5 men in black standing around the walls. President, good news from the Red Long He. The old man raised an eyebrow. Deng Yu's warehouse was raided. Several hundred of their elite were shot dead, Deng Yu among them. The word is that it was the hidden assassin of the 3 wolves. Chairman Chin made a small noise of contempt. The 3 wolves were built by this association. Whether they have a hidden assassin, other people may not know. Do we not know? That was my thought as well, President. The man hesitated. I have a guess. The assassin who wiped out the Red Long, he might be that promising young man you have had your eye on. Wei Hao? Yes. Ren Chin laid it out. 2 nights ago, he came to the Zishan range alone, late, and bought ammunition, equipment, and body armor, and shot targets until dawn. The staff said his marksmanship is close to perfect. He is guaranteed at that range by a man called Xiao Han, formerly of the Viper He, who had a personal grievance with Deng Yu and raided his flour mill, which is why Deng Yu put out a kill order on him. The relationship between the two is not casual. Ability, motive, and a great many coincidences. Chairman Chin put his cup down. He thought about a young man in a line of staff and a bodyguard who had gone still for no reason anybody could see. He has not reached his peak, he said at last. Win him over, carefully, nothing sudden. And about 10 kilometers away, in an office at the top of a tower, somebody was breaking furniture. Are you all on something? How does a crowd of you fail to handle one man? Even if he were Superman, with that many guns going off, you would expect at least some sparks. If I had not recently taken up a vegetarian diet, I would set every one of you in cement and drop you in the sea. That was the chairman of the Red Long He, in an office building in the Jiangdong Central Business District that his organization had bought outright, with a legitimate company registered in it. Outside his door, 40 tattooed men and about 100 ordinary employees in shirts and ties were all pretending to be extremely busy with paperwork. Take one hand from each of them, Hao Jin said, when he had finished throwing furniture. As a reminder. Several of his floor bosses were carried out with their right arms hanging. Then he stood at the window and looked down at a street where the snow had not melted, and thought about the only thing that actually mattered. Not the hundreds of dead, not Deng Yu, the specimen. The organization had wanted that one back. Not a standard subject, a genuine martial artist before they got to him, which had made the drug do something new, and even after his mind went, he had been worth a laboratory. Now he was gone, and somebody was going to be asked to explain it. Boss, should we keep investigating the Three Wolves assassin? He has to be connected to the Dongcheng Association. Investigate with what? Hao Jin said. If he gets annoyed and comes here, what do you propose to stop him with? Nobody had an answer. Of their 2 remaining protectors, one was unstable, and the other was still healing from an encounter with the Special Investigation Team. Then the second man offered something more useful. The survivors say an armed helicopter came over the warehouse afterward. Boss, what if the people behind this were not a gang at all? Hao Jin turned around, and his whole face changed, because a problem had just become an opportunity. Put the word out, he said. The Special Investigation Team did this. The Three Wolves assassin was their man, planted years ago. Let the organization take that up with the government, and let the monsters deal with the monsters. We stay quiet. Then he arranged appointments for the following week, with 2 counselors in the Pan family, with gifts. He was not the mad dog everybody thought he was. The fighting and the territory had been muscle flexing. The fastest way into a closed arrangement is force. And now that he was in, he intended to do what every old society eventually does, which is buy politicians and become respectable. And then, if possible, climb far enough to stop taking orders from the organization at all. The gang leader is wise, said one of his men. How many times? Said Hao Jin. It is chairman. Meanwhile, the person who had caused all of it was sitting cross-legged on a bed with his eyes shut, failing. I sat there until the light went out of the room and the whole bedroom went dark, and then I opened my eyes and let out a long breath and admitted it. I had used focus and I had very nearly fallen asleep. It was pleasant. It was relaxing. It was not meditation. I had taken the day off. I spent the morning in the snow with Qin Mei and Ling Wei. We built something that was technically a snowman, and then I went to the supermarket like a normal person. In the afternoon, I borrowed discs from He Sen on yoga masters and on how monks train, and watched them for half a day, and came out of it with a large amount of knowledge and no ability whatsoever. I could reach stillness. I could not get past it into whatever comes after. I worked out roughly where the problem was. What focus does feels close to the Zen pairing they call stopping and observing. Stopping is fixing the attention on one object, breath, or thought, until the noise dies down. Observing is what you then do with the quiet, but focus has a purpose in it. It is a tool with a job, and when it works there is a small hot satisfaction in it, an excitement. The other thing wants the exact opposite. It wants the senses cut off from the world entirely, and nothing in you stirred at all. That gap is the whole problem, and you cannot self-teach your way across a gap like that. I looked at the postcard on my table with the incantation on it. I could go back into the fog. I could go and knock on that gate and ask. No, absolutely not. I had no idea what was on the other side of any of those lights, and the rule I had made after the man in black had not changed. Do not go looking for something unpredictable until you can survive being wrong about it. So I decided to sign up for the meditation class upstairs at the club, like a normal person with a hobby. Then I counted my money, which was less fun. It was the 8th of January, and payday was the 20th. I had put $20,000 into weapons and equipment. There was a little under $90,000 in the bank, and that money was my grandfather's surgery and could not be touched by anything. Fortunately, I had come out of that warehouse with an armful of hardware and 2 items off Deng Yu's desk. In a few days, Xiaohan would turn all of it into cash, and then the problem would be solved. The next day at work, a Sanda fighter looked up at me between rounds. "And Chin, did you not sleep? Go and look in a mirror. Your eyes are as red as a rabbit's." I went and looked in a mirror. They were not red the way tired eyes are red. There was a light in them, faint, sitting under the brown, exactly as it had been in my bathroom on the night I watched something smile at me from a flooded street. I told them I had been up all night watching discs. They laughed and asked if I had a girlfriend I was overworking myself for. Then I left the training floor and went 2 doors down to the optician. I would like non-prescription glasses, I told the assistant. Something that cuts glare, something that makes the eyes look softer. She brought me 4 pairs, and I picked thin gold rims, and I stood in front of the mirror and watched a completely different man appear. Refined, gentle, harmless, a man who reads. And the light in the pupils was gone, unless you were close enough to be in trouble anyway. "Sir, these really suit you," she said, clasping her hands. "You look like the second male lead in an idol drama." The other 2 assistants came over to agree. I paid 200 yuan and left with a slightly darker expression than I had walked in with, because the second male lead is either the one who wrecks the couple or the one who suffers nobly in silence, and I did not care for either job description. My phone rang as I came out of the shop. Chu Yue, she had picked a bookstore on the Jiangdong pedestrian street, the kind that is really a cafe with books around the walls, and she was at the window table with a coffee going cold. She looked up, and her face did something small when she saw the glasses. "Glasses? I have been reading a lot." "Ah," she said, and put a book of prose poems down on top of whatever had been on the table, and did not ask again. We sat there for a while and could not find anything to talk about, which happens when 2 people know exactly one thing about each other. Then she asked, with real interest, whether I had run into any difficult problems lately. I decided to answer honestly, which surprised both of us. "I took your advice and started learning meditation on my own. I cannot get past a certain point." Something crossed her face, and it looked a lot like disappointment. "Only meditation," she said. "All right, describe it." I described it. She listened with her chin on her hand and then went straight in. "The key is habit, a clear goal, and defeating the distractions. Formally, it is 8 steps: precepts, diligence, posture, breath, gathering the mind, concentrating the spirit, entering, and stillness. From what you say, you have the first stage, and you have gone wrong at the second." Then her voice changed and got serious. "2 questions. What do you think keeping precepts means? And what do you think concentrating the spirit means?" Precepts are suppressing the desires and the noise, like an ascetic. And concentrating the spirit is clearing everything external until consciousness is in a state of complete self-awareness. She smiled and shook her head. "That is what an ordinary person thinks meditation is." She leaned in. "Precepts are not restraint, and they are not crushing your bad thoughts. They are choosing the right method to put yourself on the correct road. It is the first step, because its entire job is to set your direction, so you do not exhaust yourself for nothing. If you start facing the wrong way, then every year of effort after that is wasted effort. Many people reach stillness by many different routes, and then, whatever they got wrong at the beginning sits there forever, and they never get past gathering the mind. So the whole thing rests on 2 words, the goal and the guidance. The goal and the guidance. Clear goals, specific instruction, simple to say and almost impossible to do. Because the goal is not what you want to achieve, it is." And she stopped. She stopped mid-sentence, and I watched her decide not to finish it, and instead, she took a worn business card out of her wallet and put it on the table between us. "Some things do not survive being explained. If you are serious, go here and see for yourself. You will understand a great deal," she said it lightly. I stumbled into it once and stayed a while. It changed what I thought the world was. I picked it up. Truth and meditation. Fellowship. For a second, I honestly felt she was the closest thing I had to a teacher, and I wanted to know who she actually was. Then she added one more thing, in a completely different tone. "A piece of advice. When you go to this fellowship, wear the glasses, and do not let them know who you really are." And I looked at those strange, bright eyes across the table, and every warm feeling I had just had put its coat back on and left. The roof before dawn, in weather cold enough to make the concrete burn. I finished the horse stance, stood up out of it, shook the blood back into my legs, and then took a run of 2 steps and put 3 consecutive somersaults into the air and landed square. Then I jumped straight up onto the water tank from the ground, flipped, and landed on top of it. That is jujitsu practice, believe it or not. A somersault is the whole chain working at once. Legs, waist, back, hips. And if your core is not honest about it, you land wrong and pay for it. 80 of them. Great Master, Jujitsu Level 2. 9 free attribute points. No effect this time. I did not mind. After the thing in that warehouse, I had a very clear view of what raw attributes are worth. If my agility had been in the low 20s that night, I would not have had a fight. I would have had a chase. With me is the interesting part. 7 points into spirit, 2 into physique. Then I got down on the cold cement and did push-ups on my fingertips. 10 fingers, then 8, then fewer. The book has a road that ends at 1 finger, and the point of that road is not the chest, it is the hands. Until they close on something and do not open. 100. Rest. 100 more. And in the middle of the second set, the last percent of physique turned over. Strength 32, agility 30, physique 33, spirit 40. 2.5 hours later, with people leaving for work downstairs, I looked at the take. Focus +3, stance training +4, boxing +4, sanda +5, Muay Thai +5, Jiu-Jitsu +9, Tai Chi +6, push-up +13, squat +15, leg raise +17, pull-up +16, back bridge +13, handstand, push-up +18. The fitness numbers were still healthy. The fighting numbers had collapsed to single digits because shadowboxing does almost nothing for a man at my level now. Only real fights pay properly anymore. I want you to hold on to that, because it explains a lot about what I did next with my life. I came down off the roof and nearly walked into Inspector Chen on the 9th floor landing. And Chin, exercising? Uncle Chen, work already? Another home invasion in Quyuan. They want me there. He sighed like a man complaining and looked about 10 years younger than he had in December. It has been a while since I slept in my own bed. He had a briefcase under his arm and his collar was up. In 1 month, he had taken down a drug production ring, an underground organ market, and a major trafficking case, and he was the most useful man in the Zhangbei Police Department. Ling Wei had told me the director's application was already in to make him captain of criminal investigation, which is 2 flowers and a bar on the shoulder, and it should have happened 8 years ago. I looked at the lines in his forehead and the gray at his temples, and I lost a couple of seconds somewhere in my own childhood. Then he came up a step and put his hand on my shoulder. And Chin, thank you for all of it. He is not a talker. That was the entire speech. When this settles down, you and I are going to have a proper drink. You may have noticed the obvious question. How does a young man who moves mats at a gym keep being nearby and keep having the address every single time something like this happens? He never asked me. I never explained. I stood on the landing and watched him go down the stairs 2 at a time, and I thought, he has worked most of it out already. He has simply decided not to know. In the shower afterward, I turned the water off and found the drain blocked. Hair. A dark mat of it, enough to stop the water from going down, and the tiles were flooding. I was not surprised. That is the price of potential activation, and it has gone up, because when I started, that button had to restore a weakling who could barely manage 30 push-ups, and now it has to restore something that is not really operating inside the human range anymore. You can work out for yourself how much life energy that costs. I had already decided to stop using it casually. Now, I put a rule on it. Only against something I might genuinely lose to. Never as a convenience. While I was getting dressed, I could hear the bathhouse. Sister-in-law Chin, you have not seen these biters. The eyes roll right back and they talk nonsense and they spit up something black. It is terrifying. Possessed. Buy paper money and burn it. So many people all possessed at once. The news said rabies and mad cow. You would do better believing my information than believing the news. They were 20 meters away, through 2 heavy curtains and a wall. Since spirit went to 40, I hear everything. Not better, more. It is like a deaf man being handed a hearing aid he cannot switch off. And along with the aunties, I had the dripping, the extractor fans, the car horns on the street, and a shopkeeper 2 blocks away shouting his prices. Standing in a changing room being screamed at by an entire district. I finally understood how people go mad. Maybe this is exactly how. Maybe there is no evil spirit in it at all. I put in the 2 foam earplugs I now carry everywhere and went outside. Down on the street, Chinsha was walking to work with Chin Mei holding her hand, and Chin Mei had a new red down jacket on, bright as a lantern, and her face was pink with the cold. She takes the girl with her every day now, to the clinic, to the shops, everywhere. She does not let her out of arm's reach, and she never will again. Xiaohan picked me up at 9 in a faded domestic sedan, with Chen Feng driving. And Chin, what is this outfit? I nearly did not recognize you. He looked at the glasses and clicked his tongue. More refined than my middle school Chinese teacher. You will destroy a lot of girls with these. Better this way. If even you cannot recognize me, what chance does the red long he have? Once we were off Juchang Street, he bent down and unzipped a canvas bag on the floor mat. Then he decided that handing me bundles 1 at a time was too slow, and simply tipped the whole bag out. It rained money in the back of that car. Bricks of 100 yuan notes bouncing off the seats and rolling into the footwell. Is that all of it? This? He grinned. This is under a third. Then he did the accounts like a professional, which by then he was. 30 rifles out of the warehouse, 17 submachine guns, 2 light machine guns, 4 night vision units. You cannot move it all at once because that volume attracts attention, and dealers will push the price down, so he and Chen Feng had shifted half the rifles and 7 of the submachine guns through channels he trusted for 640,000. The machine guns and the optics were still buried at the back of a warehouse, because they were the valuable part. The solid gold Maitreya from Deng Yu's office he intended to melt into bars before selling. The other thing you brought out is an antique, he said and shrugged. Hard to move. I will need time to find a buyer who can value it. Keep it all, I said. You and Feng, sell my share and give me whatever comes in. Xiao Han put both hands up. And Qin, if you still call me your brother, take that back. Then he got serious. Forget that you were the one who went in there and took this off the Red Long He. If we are really doing the accounts, every single problem with that gang started with me, and you have saved my life twice. He turned in his seat. So, let me say it plainly. From today you are my closest brother. You tell me to go east, and I will not go west. You tell me to kill a chicken, and I will not go and get a sheep. I opened my mouth to say something sensible. He swept the money off the seat into my lap. 80% to you. Feng and I take 10 each as a running around fee. That is the arrangement. So I stopped arguing, because this was found money, and dividing found money too precisely between friends is its own kind of insult. 50 bricks of notes filled my bag until the zip complained. And for the first time in my life, the number in my head about my grandfather stopped being a problem and started being a date. There is an old saying on Jianghu, money gives a hero his courage. I got rid of that thought immediately because with a bag of cash on my knees and 2 men from a gang in the front seats, it was a bit too close to the truth. Han, has the Red Long, he left you alone? They think it was a police operation, he said. They think the special investigation team was involved, and that I am an informant. Right now they are extremely busy proving they never really knew Deng Yu. Then we do nothing. Stay quiet. Let it cool. He nodded so fast his chin hit his collar. Somewhere along the way, my friend the debt collector had become a man who took instructions from me, and Chen Feng kept glancing in the mirror at the transformation. Chin Chin was in the courtyard, with a kitchen knife in one hand and a rooster in the other, and he had been gesturing at its neck for some minutes without doing anything about it. He saw me and dropped the entire project. And Chin, you came. Sit down, have some tea. The bird escaped. Xiao Han caught it on his way past, held it up by the wings, and announced he was cooking. You cook? Big head, thick neck, either a boss or a chef. He was delighted with himself. I wanted to be a chef. Sit down and wait. I offered to help, and both of them refused, which cost me an hour of culinary experience, and I have not forgiven either of them. So I drank tea in the sun with the old man, who watched me with an intensity that was becoming uncomfortable. There was a reason for that. Since his son helped the police break a major trafficking case and appeared on the television news, the local government had turned up at that house with a drum and a plaque and given him a Good Citizen Award for bravery. Xiao Han now walked around his own home like a minor official, and Chin Chin, who had spent 11 years telling everyone in the village that his son was a waste, had started standing up straighter on his walks. To break the staring, I offered to show him my form. I ran the 24 movements in the middle of the yard. He watched with his hands behind his back and nodded, and then corrected 4 transitions, all of them real. Then I dropped into a horse stance and asked him about the standing and the breathing, and we worked through it properly, and it was worth more than a month on my own. And when I straightened up and saw the kitchen was still busy, I asked the question I had been carrying around for 3 days. Uncle Chin, once you have Qigong, is the visualization work like ordinary meditation? He put his cup down. Do you know why I did not start you on visualization? No? Because visualization is 100 times more dangerous than ordinary meditation. Then he explained it, and it is the single most useful thing anybody has ever told me. When we train the body, if you overwork it, you get ill, and you rest and you recover. If you break something, it heals. And if you decide you have had enough, you stop, and you live to 80 as an ordinary man. The body forgives. The mind does not. There is no treatment for a damaged will. There is no recovery. At best you end up unstable and seeing things. At worst you go mad, or you go out entirely, and there is nobody who can come in after you. He picked up his tea again. Think about what you already know. Your body improves, and you feel it as strength and wind. What does improving the spirit feel like? Sharper eyes, sharper ears. Wonderful. He looked at me over the cup. Now raise it further. Now you see everything, in more and more detail. Now you hear 10,000 sounds at once, and every one of them is in your head, and none of them can be turned off. Tell me you can stay clear inside that. I thought about a changing room, and 2 curtains, and 4 women 20 meters away, who might as well have been standing on my shoulders. The spirit is a strange country, he said. Some men crawl at it for 40 years and move like a snail. Others are born lucky, or they meet something, and they change overnight. That is why I made you stand like a post first, foundation, and then we talk about visualization. I could have paid for that conversation and considered it cheap. Then I asked him how far he had actually got, whether he had ever entered the state himself, what it was like. He choked on his tea, coughed 4 times, and observed that the sun was out and the weather was really very fine today. So, I changed the subject to the special investigation team, and his face closed like a door. And Chin, stay away from those people. Then he told me what they are, and I had not expected any of it. The Special Affairs Investigation Team sits under the National Security Apparatus. Its job is prevention and elimination of supernatural incidents and hostile entities that ordinary police cannot touch, with authority to match. The government covers for them by design. That is why nobody outside knows anything. And then the part that made him grip his cup. They came out of the National Martial Arts Hall, the one my ancestor founded. In the beginning, they recruited for martial artists and combat athletes, real ones. He set the cup down hard. Then biochemistry arrived, and some of those men decided the fastest way past the limit was a needle, and they took that road, and they have been on it ever since. If anyone ever tries to recruit you or offers you those drugs, you refuse. We are the correct road. They are a deviation. We come from a real lineage, and we do not blur that line. I sat there listening to a 70-year-old man in a village courtyard describe a government agency as the wrong kind of people, and I filed every word of it because within a month I was going to need all of it. Food! Zhao Han shouted from the house. Stop talking and come and eat. I would like to describe the meal. He spun the glass turntable and presented me first with something dark and impressive in a clay pot. Deer antler stewed with tiger, extremely nourishing for us martial artists. You almost never get to eat this. Chin Chin nodded gravely at how rare it was. I picked up my chopsticks and ate a piece and chewed it carefully several times while my face tried to find an expression it could live with. Well, I said eventually, it is very authentic. The value is in the authenticity. Xiao Han glowed. Exactly. The highest goal of cooking is to preserve the original flavor of the ingredient. Then he introduced the rest of the table, dish by dish. And every one of them was an animal's least public part, prepared 4 different ways, and one of them involved a seal. I looked at that spread, and something in me quietly died. Chin Chin picked up a piece, changed expression, and put away a mouthful of liquor with tremendous speed. Then he glanced sideways at me, saw a completely calm young man eating steadily, and relaxed, grateful that the guest had unusual tastes. Then the panel spoke up. You have enjoyed an exceptionally sumptuous and rare feast. Gourmet experience +1. And again. And again. I stopped with my chopsticks in the air. Gourmet had been stuck around 90 for weeks. Ordinary food had stopped paying entirely, and here it was, ticking over, once per bite. So, the rule is not that the food has to be good. The rule is that it has to be terrible, or it has to be rare. I looked at that table again, and I looked at it with completely new eyes. I have rarely eaten so much in my life. I went through the tiger and the ox and the lamb and the seal methodically in silence, while a family watched me with growing alarm, and Xiao Han laughed like a man who has been proven right in front of witnesses. He announced twice that he was the god of cookery. I let him have it. I was busy. Congratulations, expert level. Gourmet level 1. Enhancement reward. Skill effect. Poison resistance. The body gains 100% additional resistance to spoiled food and toxins on top of the physique attribute. I put my chopsticks down and looked at that for a while. I had just been handed genuine, serious protection against being poisoned, and I had earned it by eating parts of a seal at a family lunch. I want to be very clear about my position on this system. It has no taste, no timing, and no sense of occasion. It gave me the ability to survive an assassination attempt as a reward for good manners at somebody's father's house. I have never been more grateful to anything in my life. Chin Chin, meanwhile, had noticed I was too busy to talk and had moved on to his real subject, which was finding his son a respectable job now that he was a decorated citizen, and after that a wife, and after that a grandson. I supported him warmly on all 3 points. Xiao Han drank until it stopped. While a family in a village courtyard were raising glasses, a lift opened on the other side of Dongdu, in a building with no name on it. Brother Xiao and Ah Ren had never been to headquarters before. A young officer walked them through a bright corridor to a glass access door that scanned their faces before either of them touched anything, then through an open-plan floor of quiet people and into a dim laboratory. There were cylindrical tanks along one wall, with things floating in them in yellow fluid. Further down the corridor, researchers in sealed suits came out of a door and went past like ghosts. 2 men stood at a one-way window looking at a screen. Dr. Chin, Director Guo, the team members are here. On the other side of the glass, 2 assistants in protective gear were taking blood from something on a laboratory bed. It was the subject, the one that had come out of a warehouse in 3 pieces. Its head and neck had been stitched back on. It had a helmet of cables on it, and it looked from a distance almost like a man again. He had been lobotomized before any of this, Dr. Chin said, to the screen more than to anyone. The tissue that was taken out has been replaced with some kind of blue material. It removed every human emotion he had, and that is precisely what let him tolerate the hormone load. Cell division accelerates. Recovery improves enormously. He sat back. The organization behind the Red Long, he has serious research capability. They have found a genuinely new road in physical restoration. A pause, and then quietly. If that road runs, the old dream about not dying stops being a legend. Then he remembered there were two men standing behind him. You did well. You will be rewarded. He turned around. Now, this man in black who killed the subject. Do we know whether he is from one of the great families? That question mattered a great deal to them, because the families that own the country's economy and the agency that hunts monsters are not friends. And if the families found out what was on that table, there would be trouble. I can be certain of one thing, Brother Xiao said carefully. He was not one of the irrational ones. If he had been, he would not have killed it and then handed us the body. He would have drained it to feed himself. Director Guo took it from there. I have been through the files. There is no family that fits under Wen or Weng or anything close. So the boy and the girl are most likely illegitimate children of some conglomerate's son. Awakened ability, quietly recalled to Dongdu, not yet entered into the family register. They keep files on the bloodlines of every significant family in the country and several abroad. Those files are secret for a reason. If they ever came out, half the legislature would be filing motions by lunchtime. They have not reacted at all, Director Guo went on, which means the boy is probably a beginner who has no idea what the subject was worth and simply blundered into it while out hunting. Dr. Chin found that acceptable. Good, then my work will not be interrupted. I have entered him into the file, Director Guo said. Codename Asura. Intelligence will keep an eye on him. If he comes from a great house, the talent will show itself sooner or later. Shura is what they call the aristocratic bloodlines. Asura means the ability is right and the identity is wrong. Not one man in that laboratory considered the possibility that he was nobody at all. That is a very natural thing. Any of them could have told you that an ordinary person who awakens has about one chance in a million of not going insane immediately, and that anyone who gets to Class C or above without losing his mind must come from somewhere. If he is not from a wealthy and powerful family, what else could he be? Director Guo did think of another possibility. It came to him for about a second, and he dismissed it because it was not realistic either. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bed and tried again. The moon came through the gap in the curtains. Downstairs, somebody was revving an engine like a man trying to make a point. I opened my eyes in the dark, and my own reflection came back at me from the window glass, faintly red. My senses had made my flat uninhabitable. Every sound in the building was in my skull. The engine downstairs might as well have been in the room with me, and I could not put it anywhere. Trying to meditate in that state is a test of willpower, and nothing else. Even focus was not doing what it used to do. It was leaving residue. The world came back through the edges. I had 40 points of spirit and no ability whatsoever to control any of it. It was like being an extremely strong man who has never learned to fight. No, worse than that. Chin Chin had told me the road had no way back, and I had already walked a long way down it, and the abnormalities were getting worse, not better. So I took the earplugs out of my ears. If it was going to be a test of will, then I would take the test properly instead of cheating on it. Then I sat the way it is supposed to be. Sat. Eyes half closed, attention at the tip of the nose at the heart. And I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The counting method, in through the nose for 4, out for 4. And when your attention wanders, and it does, you go back to 1 without complaining about it. That is the whole technique. It is 4,000 years old, and it is embarrassingly simple. Focus, activate. Most of the noise went. Not all. Enough. And I stayed there, counting for a long time, letting the breath get longer, letting the count get slower, until at some point, the counting was doing itself, and I had stopped supervising. Then the light came. Congratulations. Through your tireless efforts, your skill has reached Great Master. Focus Level 2. Enhancement Reward. Skill Effect. Heart Steel. While using focus, willpower is increased by 200%. Spiritual energy consumption is increased by 100%. I opened my eyes in the dark with sweat running down my face, like I had done a full session on the roof. Then I switched focus back on to see what I had bought. The world went away, not muffled, gone. It was like a steel shell coming up around me, and everything that had been beating on the inside of my head for a month simply stopped existing. The engine outside was a breeze going past. The neighbor's child, who screams, became a small, polite noise happening in another country. And inside my own head, there was nothing. No loops, no noise, no opinions. One thought, which was stability, and one feeling, which was quiet. I sat there in the dark inside that shell, and I could have wept, and instead I said, "Very good," which was all I could manage. I was back where I had been before. Spirit hit 40, and then some. 200% willpower for double the spiritual cost. That is not a bargain. That is a lifeline sold at a fair price. I lay down after that and could not sleep. And after a while, I got up and took the business card out of my bag and read the 4 words on it again. Truth and Meditation Fellowship. The next day at noon, I finished a coaching session, showered, and went up to the 3rd floor of the shopping mall to find the meditation class. The 3rd floor is much quieter than the first 2. Several good units were sitting empty. I found the right shop front and it was shut. I went to the glass and looked in. Chairs stacked crooked, rubbish on the floor. Nobody had been in there in weeks. Next to the door, taped up, was a clean white sheet of paper. Prime location for sale. I stood there for a long time. Then I took out the card, and there was no address on it, just a phone number, and I dialed it in the middle of a shopping mall. It rang, and then a very pleasant woman's voice said, "Hello, Orange Heart Travel Agency. We can provide a full range of travel services. How may I help you?" I checked the card twice. "Excuse me, I am looking for the Truth and Meditation Fellowship, not a travel agency." "Yes, sir, you have come to the right place." She sounded even more delighted. The Truth and Meditation Fellowship is one of Orange Heart's partners. For our exhausted urban professionals and young students, we have launched a special package called Mind and Meditation. Over 7 days, we will take you away from the concrete and the steel and into a beautiful paradise. In a harmonious natural setting, our dedicated spiritual mentors will teach you mindfulness meditation, release stress, relieve anxiety, and give you a new and optimistic outlook. I stood there listening to a woman sell me a holiday. Somewhere in the middle of it, some part of me was quietly asking whether I had been taken in by an extremely elaborate sales technique. "Sir, we are recruiting members for the latest tour group. If you are interested, call back within 2 days to register." I thought about a woman in thin glasses saying, "Wear the glasses and do not let them know who you are." I asked for the details. 7 days. Departure in 2 days. Transport, accommodation, entrance fees, and tuition all included. 2,300 yuan. 2,300 yuan. Whatever that place was, it was not a scam, because no scam prices itself, like a school trip. I did the arithmetic on the way down the escalator, and it worked. 2 days here, 7 or 8 days there and back, which puts me home before my grandfather's operation. Then I went to a bank and stood at the counter and wired 150,000 yuan into my mother's account. It took about 90 seconds. The clerk did not look up. That number covers the surgery, the ward, the follow-up, and the recovery, with room in it. It does not depend on my uncle's deal closing, or on the club, or on anything at all going right for anybody ever again. It is simply there. I stood outside the bank in the cold and thought about a young man on the 8th floor of Renan Hospital, listening to a doctor talk about a schedule, with 4,000 yuan a month and a mop. 14 months. That is how long it took. 14 months from a man who could not do 20 push-ups on a freezing floor. Then I called my mother. "And Chin, are you eating?" "I am eating. Mama, I have put some money in your account. Do not argue with me about it and do not save it. It is for grandfather." There was a silence on the line that went on slightly too long. "How much?" "Enough." Another silence. "Where did you?" "Sparring partner, the rate went up, and I have been doing private sessions." "That is not a lie. Every individual sentence in it is true." She started to cry, quietly, in the way she does where she pretends it is the wind, and then she pulled herself together and told me the doctor had confirmed the operation for somewhere between the 24th and the 27th, and asked me if I was warm enough. Then I told her I was going away for a few days with some classmates from before, a trip, to relax after the exam. I told her that so that she would not come home, find the flat empty, fail to reach me, and think something had happened, which was, in fairness, an entirely reasonable thing for her to think. 2 days later, on the 15th of January, the sky was completely clear. I got to the meeting point early with a shoulder bag and a change of clothes in it, and about 50 people were already there, more women than men. Almost all of them between 20 and 40. I was among the youngest by some distance, and every single one of them had come alone, which is a thing you notice, and which made the whole group very quiet. At 8, we boarded a coach to the port, and at the port, we boarded a ship. 7.5 hours to an island in a province south of Dongdu. Warm currents run past it all year, so it stays green through winter, which is apparently why somebody decided to make it a resort. I stood on the deck with my elbows on the rail while the coastline went away behind us. Somewhere back there, in a building with no name on it, a file had been opened with a code name on the front of it, and men who hunt monsters for a living had decided I was the illegitimate son of somebody important, because the alternative was not realistic. Somewhere back there, a gang chairman had told the world it was all the government's doing, and the organization was going to believe him, and a war was going to start over a thing I had done for a 12-year-old girl. And somewhere back there, my grandfather had a date for his operation. I looked at the water for a long time. 14 months ago, I got knocked down by 20 push-ups on a cold floor, and the only thing I owned was a system that gave me a green talent for being good-looking. Now, I have a bag with 50 bricks of cash in it, 4 dead men's weapons in a warehouse, a girl who calls me brother, and a body that a room full of professionals cannot hurt. And I am standing on a boat because the one thing I cannot beat is the noise inside my own head. The sun went down into the sea and turned the whole thing red, and then somebody on the deck pointed, and the outline of an island came up out of the haze in front of us. The horn went off above me, long and flat, and the ship came round toward the harbor. Whatever the Truth and Meditation Fellowship actually was, it was down there, and it had cost me 2,300 yuan, and a woman who could not read my mind had told me to keep my face hidden while I was on it. I put my glasses on,